Chapter 739. Bai Xiaowen put away the cold winter wand, took a step back and raised his hand slightly. Zhang Sunming suddenly felt a gust of wind behind him. It seemed that someone was ambushing him. He quickly retracted his sword and dodged to the side. He saw a white shadow with a fishy smell almost touching his right cheek. It was the giant wolf the size of a buffalo. Without waiting for Zhang Sunming to stabilize his footing, a vicious gust of wind came from behind him again. He held back a mouthful of true qi, and once again used his light body technique to dodge. This time, it was actually a tall and sturdy skeleton, which swung a large sword and came close to him. The two changes had already exhausted Zhang Sunming's true qi. There was a limit to the amount of true qi that could be used in each circulation, i.e., breathing. There was a clap of thunder above his head. Zhang Sunming struggled to raise his head, only to see a dazzling beam of light striking down. Under Bai Xiaowen's control, the skeletal fiend finally found an opportunity to cast a lightning strike. Zhang Sunming's body shook. His silver hair stood on end and his skin was charred black. The damage caused by this lightning strike was secondary. What Bai Xiaowen really wanted was the extremely short period of paralysis during the moment of the lightning strike. The moment the lightning strike landed, Bai Xiaowen had already leapt forward. A thin line invisible to the naked eye connected Bai Xiaowen and the skeleton warrior. Power symbiosis, 50% of the skeleton warrior's strength. The skeleton warrior's strength had reached 49 points after the Black Soul Stones +6 to all attributes, Bai Xiaowen's spiritual power, and the shaman's spiritual power bonus. Through power symbiosis, Bai Xiaowen could temporarily increase strength by 25. Moreover, Bai Xiaowen had bound life sharing to the butcher in advance. During the fight between the butcher and He Shiyuan, the damage that the butcher received, as well as the damage caused by the rotting poison, would be shared by Bai Xiaowen. In 39 seconds, the butcher had shared more than 200 damage. With the pain potential of the Ring of Agony, Bai Xiaowen's strength increased by another 20 points. At this moment, Bai Xiaowen's total strength had reached 78 points. Bai Xiaowen's body flashed with a bloody light as he activated Blood Rage. A flaming fist slammed into Zhang Sunming's chest. Zhang Sunming was unable to dodge the remaining power of the lightning strike, but his true qi circulation had already recovered. Realizing the horror of this punch, Zhang Sunming took a deep breath and activated his internal strength to defend himself. Rumble! A scorching stream of fire shot out from Zhang Sunming's back. The back of his gray clothes exploded, and a clearly visible fiery fist mark was projected onto Zhang Sunming's back. His back was in such a state, and his chest, which had been hit by the fist, had broken bones and black burn marks. This punch directly extinguished Zhang Sunming's last shred of vitality. This veteran of the Jianghu who had slaughtered the entire Duanshui villa spat out a mouthful of black blood, and his gaze became unfocused. Zhang Sunming felt that all the strength in his body was leaving him. He staggered back a few steps, and his skinny finger trembled as he pointed at Bai Xiaowen. Then, with a plop, he fell to the ground and breathed his last. Bai Xiaowen picked up the golden treasure chest left by Zhang Sunming. At this time, he had received a notification that in the main mission besieging the Blood God Palace, part of the goal of killing a famous character had been announced as completed. However, the main mission required them to participate in the Battle of the Blood God Palace. The 4 members of the White Phoenix Squad still had to wait until the Battle of the Blood God Palace ended before they could complete the main mission. The other 2 people, Gugu and Ishiyuan, saw that Zhang Sunming was killed by Bai Xiaowen with one punch, and their eyes were wide open. After the initial shock, Gu and Ishiyuan quickly reacted and used their qinggong to turn around and escape. As the saying goes, a gentleman stands for righteousness, while a villain stands for profit. These 3 people were all people who would fly away in the face of disaster. Naturally, they had no intention of avenging Zhang Sunming. As for the consequences of Bai Xiaowen exposing their evil deeds and making it impossible for them to have a foothold in the Righteous Alliance, the 2 of them could no longer consider it. Saving their lives was more important. Gugu's internal energy was profound, and his qigong was brilliant, so he ran very fast. However, He Shiyuan was not so lucky. He was the leader of the younger generation of the Infinite Sword sect, and his strength as a level 7 leader was definitely not weak. However, his bad luck was that he was entangled by Butcher's decaying toxins, which greatly reduced his movement speed. In addition, He Shiyuan's decision to escape was half a beat slower than Gugu's. When he was about to escape from Butcher's close combat range, the Wrath Claw had already flown over and intercepted him. Li Shi and Han Su chased after Gugu, while Bai Xiaowen's summoned creatures rushed to besiege He Shiyuan. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands, not to mention that Bai Xiaowen had taken out his Desert Eagle again to supplement his long-range shooting. He Shiyuan, a level 7 leader, had lost half of his combat power under the influence of the decaying toxins. Soon, he was surrounded and killed by Bai Xiaowen's summoned creatures. Bai Xiaowen whistled, and the cries of the white eagles sounded in the sky, echoing from afar. That old man can't escape. Shi and I will chase after him together. Bai Xiaowen stepped onto number 1, and Li Shi sat on number 2. The 2 white eagles carried the 2 of them and spread their wings to fly. However, the sound of the wind flashed below, and 2 sharp whistles sounded. White eagles number 1 and number 2 let out sorrowful cries at the same time. Their wings trembled, and they fell diagonally. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi were shocked and jumped down at the same time. Fortunately, the height was only about 10 meters, so it was not a big problem for the awakened ones. What's going on? After Li Shi jumped down, he hurriedly ran over to check the condition of the 2 white eagles. He saw that there was a small black spot the size of a needle on each of the white eagle's claws, but it was swollen. It was obvious that it was highly toxic. Was it Guzhen's poison needle? Asked Han Su, who had rushed over. Bai Xiaowen scanned the area with his psychic power and instantly locked onto a target. He straightened his back and said in a deep voice, "No, the old man from Guzhen has already gone far away. It was someone else who sent the poison needles." He suddenly raised his voice and looked at a dense forest. He said loudly, "Come out." With a soft laugh, a slim white figure flashed out. It was a woman. 2 white ribbons were wrapped around her shoulders and arms. With a light tap of her toes, she bounced several meters away like a bamboo pole. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, making her look like a fairy. Bai Xiaowen frowned and said in the team channel, "Be careful. Prepare for battle." Li Shi shouted, "Who are you? What right do you have to hurt my eagles?" A smile appeared on the beautiful face of the woman in white. "You don't need to know who I am. As for why I attacked, you should ask the man beside you first." Li Shi looked at Bai Xiaowen. "Do you know each other?" Bai Xiaowen was under great pressure. He did not answer Li Shi directly. Instead, he looked at the woman in white and said, "Miss, I saw you bathing unintentionally. Besides, I followed the rules of etiquette and did not offend you. You've gone too far by making things difficult for me." The woman in white said coldly, "You pretended to listen to me and hanged yourself. You fooled me. Humph, if it weren't for the fact that you don't have any internal energy, how could you fool me? However, there's something strange about you. You didn't cultivate any internal energy, but you were still able to kill Zhang Sun Ming." She was angry. She had mistakenly thought that Bai Xiaowen was just an ordinary person. Because she could not feel any internal energy flowing in Bai Xiaowen, she believed Bai Xiaowen's hanging himself to be true. If it were a martial arts master from the sword song world who was proficient in internal energy, such as He Shiyuan, he would not be able to fool her. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. He could clearly feel that the attitude of the woman in white was a little different from the last time they bumped into each other at the cold pool. She was not as cold as before. This was normal. Last time, the woman in white thought that Bai Xiaowen was an ordinary person. For a martial arts master like her, he was no different from grass. Naturally, she would not pretend to be polite. But now, after seeing Bai Xiaowen's ability to kill Zhang Sun Ming, the woman in white's attitude towards Bai Xiaowen had changed. At least, she saw Bai Xiaowen as her own kind. May I ask where you are from? Bai Xiaowen was a little suspicious. The woman in white in front of him did not seem to be the dark concubine herself. If she was a top master like the dark concubine, Zhang Sunming would probably be no different from an ordinary person in her eyes. Her attitude would not change. The change in attitude also implied that the strength of the woman in white was not at the top level. Bai Xiaowen was a lot more relieved in an instant. The woman in white said faintly, "My surname is Gu." Bai Xiaowen was finally relieved. The dark concubine's full name was Wei Siqin. Her surname was definitely not Gu. And with the dark concubine's temperament, she would not change the surname of a few juniors. Bai Xiaowen cupped his hands and said, "Miss Gu, I've offended you before. But please give me the antidote and let me detoxify the two eagles." The woman in white shook her head and said, "I don't need poison. Those two white eagles only lost their ability to move because their blood vessels were sealed by my jade forging formula. They will be back to normal in an hour." Bai Xiaowen frowned. Guzhen had already run further and further away. Without the white eagles chasing after him, it was impossible for that old bastard to catch up with him. He sighed and said, "To tell you the truth, that old man Gu Cheng who escaped is my father's archenemy. Miss Gu, you might have inadvertently stopped me, but it will make me regret it for the rest of my life." The woman in white did not have the slightest trace of regret on her face. She said calmly, "You can just say that it was a misunderstanding and forget about what happened before. Even if I stopped you from chasing after your enemy, it was just an eye for an eye." Li Shi snorted with a hint of anger. "Then are we even now?" Bai Xiaowen said. Although he knew that this woman surnamed Gu was not the dark concubine, he did not want to be enemies with her. The main reason was that she was too mysterious. He could not get any information from clear vision. It was better not to start a war with this kind of person who he did not know the details of, nor did he know whether she was friend or foe. The woman in white said, "It's not important whether we're even or not. There are many injustices in the world. Have you ever thought about what you'll do after killing your enemy?" Bai Xiaowen frowned, showing a slightly blank expression. The woman in white said indifferently, "You have a deep hatred for the Boundless Sword sect, and the Boundless Sword sect is a large righteous sect. You killed Zhang Sunming, He Shiyuan, and the others. Although you said it was revenge, would those hypocrites of the righteous Wuling believe you? If you don't have any evidence, how can you argue against a large sect like the Boundless Sword sect? Moreover, what if the mastermind behind your father's death was the Boundless Sword sect's sect leader?" Bai Xiaowen said, "Originally, I had a plan. I planned to lead the righteous Wuling people here and witness the faces of Zhang Sunming and the others. But now there's a deviation. It's hard for me to make the righteous Wuling believe in the crimes of Zhang Sunming and the others. As for the Boundless Sword sect leader, he's not someone I can shake." The woman in white narrowed her eyes and said, "Now I have an idea. If you want revenge, why don't you join the Blood God Palace? Only the Blood God Palace has the position and the power to help you take revenge." "Miss Gu is indeed a member of the Blood God Palace," Bai Xiaowen said. The woman in white nodded slightly. Bai Xiaowen said, "How can the Blood God Palace take a fancy to a down-and-out person like me? Moreover, in the 10,000 Snake Valley, I offended poisonous Guanyin and killed Chu Zhongheng and Nie Jing, two elders of the 10,000 Snake Valley. I'm afraid I can't meet the Blood God Palace." Hearing the name Poisonous Guanyin, the woman in white snorted slightly. "You don't have to worry about this. As long as you work for me loyally, Jimingju, I can't do anything to you." Bai Xiaowen still shook his head. "I still need to think about joining the Blood God Palace. I thought you were a talent. Why are you hesitating in such a big matter?" The woman in white said faintly, "Do you think you have a way out?" Bai Xiaowen pretended to misunderstand and showed a guarded expression. "Miss Gu, are you trying to force me to join the Blood God Palace? You think too highly of yourself. Forget it, there will be a time when you come to beg me." With that, the woman in white turned around and floated away. Bai Xiaowen said loudly, "What do you mean by that, Miss Gu? In this vast sea of people, I'm afraid we won't have a chance to meet again. Even if I want to beg you, I'm afraid I won't be able to find you. The woman in white didn't stop and threw out a sentence from afar. When you want to see me, come to the heart cleansing pool. Looking at the back of the woman in white, Li Shi was still somewhat angry. This woman is so strange. She caused us to fail our mission. Bai Xiaowen checked the wounds of the two white eagles and comforted him. This person is very mysterious. Even I can't see through her. Fortunately, she doesn't seem to have much malice toward us. Hey, I heard you saw her bathing. Li Shi began to grind his teeth. Bai Xiaowen covered his head and scurried away. It's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Quickly check on Yi in 22. What if the woman with the surname Gu lied and used poison needles? What if the two white eagles are disabled? Li Shi said. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, since the woman in white wants to recruit us, she won't lie about this matter and lose her credibility. After a pause, he stood up straight and looked into the distance. In comparison, I'm more worried about Sister Qiao. Sister Qiao? She's a hero. What could happen to her? Li Shi said. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. The difficulty of the Sword Song realm is too high. There are leader-level masters everywhere. Especially when we're involved in the Battle of the Blood God Palace. There will be more than 100 leader-level masters participating in the battle. A hero won't be able to do much. Hansu said, it's indeed a bit strange. Didn't Senior Qiao Rui go to find the masters of the three sects to meet here? She hasn't appeared yet. Chapter 740. Bai Xiaowen carefully sensed the aura of this group of people. Judging by their standing position, this group was vaguely divided into 5 small groups, each with 1 or 2 leaders. In the team channel, Bai Xiaowen said, it seems that the Thunder Fire Hall, Infinite Sword Sect, and Huijian's sect have joined up with the other 2 sections. While speaking, a man with a face of a rat suddenly sniffed and said, everyone, stop for a moment. There's a smell of blood here. Someone laughed and said, I've long heard of the wild dog Taoist of the Mount Tai sect. His sense of smell is really the best in the martial arts world, someone echoed, wild dog Taoist's sense of smell is indeed outstanding. There are traces of fighting nearby. Someone must have fought here. Bai Xiaowen and the other 2 looked in the direction of the voice and were slightly surprised. The person who spoke was Gu Jin, who had escaped before. Being called wild dog by someone, the wild dog Taoist was not ashamed. Instead, he was proud. He said proudly, of course. Most of my abilities are in my nose. Let me look for it again. The wild dog Taoist was like a dog. He bent over on the ground and sniffed left and right. Gradually, he led the group to the place where Bai Xiaowen and the other 2 buried the bodies and stood up. He firmly pushed aside the tangled vines and pointed to the ground. There's something strange here. It's obviously new soil. Why are there vines growing on it? 2 martial artists had already gone over and dug a pit. Exclamations sounded at the same time. In the pit, the chewed and mutilated limbs of Zhang Sunming and He Shiyuan were revealed. It's the mark of the Infinite Sword Sect. Although it was difficult to recognize the face, the yin-yang symbol of the Infinite Sword Sect was real. Gu Jin's knees went soft and he knelt in front of the pit. He said, it must be the remains of senior brother Zhang Sun and martial niece He. For a moment, the people of the Infinite Sword Sect all looked sorrowful. Killing people is just a matter of nodding their heads on the ground. Yet they still want to ruin their bodies. I wonder if senior brother Gu knows who did it. A blue-clothed, scholarly-looking leader wearing a Confucian robe asked. I split up with senior martial brother Zhang Sun and the others to explore the way. We don't know who the murderer is. However, this incomplete skeleton reminds me of a person. Gu Qing muttered. On the side, the people from the Thunder Fire Hall and the Intelligent Sword Sect looked at each other, wanting to say something but hesitating. The disciples of the Infinite Sword Sect, on the other hand, were in high spirits. It's Bai One. That's right, he manipulated the corpse monsters. After eating the corpses, they would end up like this. Not far away, the 3 members of the White Phoenix team who were hiding looked at each other in dismay. Corpses of chieftains were rare. When the butcher had devoured Chu Zhongheng and his companion, he had obtained an additional 200 HP. However, this effect would only last for 24 hours before it would weaken. Therefore, after killing Zhang Sunming and He Shiyuan, Bai Xiaowen allowed the butcher to devour Zhang Sunming's corpse. It also had a maximum of 200 HP, and it could last for a maximum duration. It should be noted that the maximum HP gained from devouring multiple corpses would not accumulate. It would only be the maximum HP gained within the effective duration. In other words, it did not matter if He Shiyuan's corpse was eaten or not. However, after the butcher was transplanted with the stomach of the flesh devourer, his thirst for flesh and blood was endless. He had also eaten He Shiyuan's corpse, purely for the sake of his appetite. Previously, he had devoured the corpses of Chu Zhongheng and Ye Jing for the same reason. In the team channel, Li Shi said, "We did kill them, but there was a reason for it. Should we go and explain?" Bai Xiaowen slowly shook his head. Li Shi said in a low voice, "If we don't show up this time and let everyone form a preconceived impression of us, it will be difficult to change it." Before Bai Xiaowen could say anything, he heard the experts of the righteous path cursing Bai Wen and his companions. "This little devil is so vicious. It's a pity that senior brother Zhang Sun is quite famous in the righteous path, and martial nephew he is one of the candidates for the next sect master of the Infinite Sword sect. He has a bright future, but he destroyed them in the hands of this devil with the surname Bai. He saved you before, but it was probably an act. Otherwise, even if he has 3 heads and 6 arms, how can he fight against a famous devil like merciless Guanyin?" Elder Wuan of the Infinite Sword sect said, "Everyone, please wait for a moment. This matter is complicated and confusing. As for the truth, we still need to see Bai Wen and confront him face to face before making a decision." Lei Qing of the Thunder Fire sect nodded and said, "That's right. If it wasn't for Bai Wen, the experts of our 3 sects would have been wiped out. He saved you to gain your trust." Wild Dog Taoist jumped out and said, "Don't you understand? He didn't take his revenge and left the righteous faction. He even sent a maid to ask for help, leading us into the ambush of the Blood God Palace's demons. He let your 3 sects go, but ambushed our Taishan sect and Jiuhua sect together. Isn't this a win-win deal?" "Yes, in the mechanism of Stone Tablet Valley, I saw it clearly. That maid was taken away by 2 Blood God Palace devils." Someone spoke out to testify. Wuang and Lei Qing still wanted to speak, but Guzhen at the side sighed and cried, "Senior brother Zhang Sun. When you and I entered the Infinite Sword sect when we were young, we practiced sword techniques day and night. Although we weren't brothers, we were as close as brothers. Now that you died in the hands of a devil, even your bones can't be preserved. If I can't take revenge for you, I won't have the face to see you in the underworld." The sight of an old man weeping with snot and tears was truly moving. On the side, the righteous faction people were all unbearably indignant. Obscenities came out one after another, cursing 18 generations of Duanshui manners Bai Wen's ancestors. "Kill Bai Wen, take revenge. Kill Bai Wen, take revenge." As the slogan rang out, Bai Xiaowen and the other 2, who were hiding in the dark, watched this scene with mixed feelings. As expected, "We can't go out. We don't have any evidence, so we can't prove Zhang Sunming and He Shiyuan's crimes at all." Li Shi sighed and said, "Moreover, that old bastard called Guzhen's acting skills are too good. I really want to stab him to death. Before we prove that Guzhen and the other 2 are the murderers, we can't return to the righteous path," Bai Xiaowen said. "Then what should we do? Are we really going to join the Blood God Palace?" Li Shi asked. "Joining the Blood God Palace is tantamount to drinking poison to quench thirst. It will confirm the righteous path people's malicious speculation about us." Bai Xiaowen took a breath. "But, we have no choice now. We have to meet the woman in white surnamed Gu." Li Shi nodded. "Yes, Sister Qiao is still in the hands of the Blood God Palace." The 3 of them communicated in the team channel. In fact, there were 2 of them. Hansu was a taciturn person. But at the same time, the righteous path people made a move again. Chapter 741. The 3 members of the White Phoenix team were all worried. This Taoist wild dog's nose was even more sensitive than the Wrath Claw. It was only a matter of time before he found the 3 of them. Li Shi said, "What should we do? Should we call E1 and air over?" With the speed of the 3 of them, it was unrealistic for them to escape in front of so many martial artists who were good at Qigong. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, "No, when the white eagles fly down or up, they will be attacked by hidden weapons." He closed his eyes slightly and his psychic power spread out like invisible tentacles. Although he could not precisely control the movements of his servants, Bai Xiaowen could use his psychic power to command E1 to move in a certain direction from afar. With a cry, E1 flew out of the clouds with air and gradually lowered their altitude. The cry also alerted the members of the Righteous Alliance on the ground. They looked up and saw 2 white eagles. "It's Baiwen's 2 eagles." Someone shouted. "Yes, I saw them twice when they were following us." Bai Xiaowen commanded with his psychic power. E1 flew towards the west and air followed closely. Which master can shoot down these 2 feathered beasts? The white eagles are probably more than 100 feet away from us. It's too far away. Unless we have a strong bow or crossbow, if we rely on manpower to shoot hidden weapons, even if we can reach this height, we will have used up all our strength. It's okay. Looking at the situation, Baiwen should be summoning the 2 white eagles. We just need to follow the white eagles and we can find Baiwen. A group of martial arts masters used their Qigong and quickly chased after them. But that Taoist wild dog, before he left, still looked back suspiciously at the valley. Relying on the white eagles to lure away the group of martial arts masters, Bai Xiaowen and the other 2 appeared from their hiding place. "What should we do now?" Li Shi and Han Su's eyes were fixed on Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen said slowly, "Find the woman in white surnamed Gu." "Do you know where the heart-cleansing pond is?" Li Shi asked. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly, but the enchanting figure of the woman surnamed Gu bathing in the cold pond unexpectedly appeared in his mind, and his heart couldn't help but tremble. He calmed himself down and led Li Shi and Han Su back to the cold pond. When they were near the cold pond, Bai Xiaowen pointed to the cave on the right, which was covered by vines, and said, "That cave is the ancestral land of the Bai family. After I entered the ancestral land, I pretended to take away a tattered scroll, which fooled Zhang Sun Ming and the other 2. Li Shi said, "It's a pity that your plan to let Sister Qiao attract the masters of the 3 sects and expose Zhang Sun Ming and the other 2's true colors was not correct. Otherwise, we could still be in the martial arts world." Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, "I was wrong. Actually, with my fighting style, it's very difficult for me to gain a foothold in the martial arts world. It's still acceptable to control corpse monsters, but devouring corpses is completely different from the way of the martial arts world. Maybe I should have chosen the evil martial arts world from the beginning." Li Shi didn't care much and said, "The camp you chose at the beginning doesn't have much impact. It's not like you're hanging yourself on a tree of the martial arts world. Didn't you say that the flowery sect is a sect of rapists, whether it's the orthodox or the evil martial arts? I don't want you and Han Su to wear the hat of rapists." While talking, the 3 of them had already circled around the cold pond. The pond water was so clear that the bottom could be seen. There was a faint ice mist on the surface of the pond. Li Shi cupped a handful of water and said in surprise, "This water is a bit strange. There's a chill that keeps drilling into the bones. It's really rare to see such cold water without freezing." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and said, "Let's not talk about this first. That woman surnamed Gu asked us to find her at the heart-cleansing pond. Why can't we see her? Old Han, Shi, look around and see if there's any information about the mechanism." The 3 of them spread out and searched. After a quarter of an hour, they found nothing. Suddenly, a scolding voice was heard, "Good thieves, I knew it was a diversionary tactic. Why don't you quickly surrender?" The voice was a bit familiar. When Bai Xiaowen and the other two looked up, they saw a group of more than 10 martial arts masters coming out of the mountain pass on the other side of the cold pond. The man standing at the front was the wild dog Taoist of the Taishan sect. The people behind the wild dog Taoist were all unfamiliar faces. Judging from their clothes, they should also be masters of the Taishan sect. These people came prepared. When they were tracking, they used the technique of hiding their tracks and holding their breath. This technique was very effective against the psychic senses of people with psychic abilities. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen did not notice them. Bai Xiaowen glanced at the psionic waves of these people. 2 of them were high-level leaders. Their aura was similar to that of Zhang Sunming and Gu Jin. They should be level 8 as well. Among the other people, there was a slightly younger level 7 leader. He should be the leader of the younger generation. As for the wild dog Taoist, he was just an elite. He was famous because of the talent of his nose. You're quite capable to be able to find this place, Bai Xiaowen said. Taoist wild dog said proudly, Little Bai, that diversion tactic of yours may be able to fool others, but it can't fool me. My nose has always been the most sensitive. I've never made a mistake. In the valley where you were hiding, I kept smelling the scent of living people. But there were many heroes here, so the scent was mixed. That's why I couldn't find you immediately. Later, I secretly discussed with Brother Luo. We pretended to leave the team and return to the original place. As expected, we smelled the change in scent. That's why we followed the clues all the way here. This deciphering strategy and reverse tracking was the work of the wild dog Taoist. If he didn't boast in front of his prey, he would definitely feel uncomfortable. In front of the wild dog Taoist, the lanky level 8 leader with slanted eyebrows said, You are really Bai Xiaowen. The one who killed Zhang Sunming and Yi Shiyuan and drove the zombies to destroy their bodies was you. Quickly kneel down and accept your surrender. I, Luo Shizhen, will give you a chance to defend yourself in front of the martial arts community. Bai Xiaowen said calmly, I killed those 2. They killed my whole family. They deserved it. Luo Shizhen sneered and said, Looking at your decent temperament, you're actually a traitor who pretends to be loyal. After committing such a crime, you still dare to make false accusations. Another level 8 leader said, Brother Luo, there's no need to talk nonsense with this kid. Anyway, we've already sent out the fire arrows. The Boundless Sword Sect, Intelligent Sword Sect, Thunder Fire Hall, and Jiuhua Sect will be here soon. Capture them first, then hand them over to the martial arts community to deal with. Luo Shizhen nodded and said, That's right. But it's said that this kid is quite strange. Even Zhang Sunming fell in his hands. You have to be careful when you act. Chapter 742. Suddenly, the sound of a flute was heard. It was lingering and moving. Who is it? Luo Shizhen and Bai Xiaowen both turned to look. It was night time, the moon was high up in the sky, the earth was bright like a misty day. On the cliff, there was a graceful woman in white who looked like a celestial being. Her silk ribbon fluttered in the wind as she played a flute. This woman is so strange. She doesn't look like a mortal. Could she be a mountain spirit? The Taishan sect people were stunned. The inner strength in their bodies followed the rhythm of the flute. Later, even the flow of their blood and heart started to follow the rhythm of the flute. Bai Xiaowen immediately recognized that this beauty in white was the mysterious Gu woman they were looking for. He whispered in the team channel, Be careful. This is probably a powerful martial art. The 3 of them forced themselves to calm down. Luckily, they didn't cultivate inner strength, and they had seen how powerful the Gu woman was, so they were wary and wouldn't fall for her trick. The Taishan sect people were already following the rhythm of the flute, dancing with joy. Suddenly, a young Taishan sect disciple's face turned red and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Ah! Luo Shizhen suddenly woke up, his mind became clear, he used his inner strength and roared. Dust fell from the mountain wall not far away. This roar was like a clap of thunder, and the sound of the flute stopped abruptly. The Taishan sect people woke up, they were all at a loss. Only the disciple with the lowest cultivation, the one who spat out blood, fell to the ground. The level 8 leader beside Luo Shirzhen hurriedly bent over, using 2 fingers to check the disciple's pulse. After a few seconds, he sighed. Good, he suffered some minor internal injuries, he will recover after a few days of rest. Luo Shirzhen was relieved. He looked up at the Gu woman and asked, "Who are you?" The woman in white didn't answer. Luo Shirzhen sneered, "Don't think I can't see your background. The strange song you just played is probably Concubine Yin's inverse blood-burning heart song. You must be related to Blood God Palace. Reverse blood heart incineration tune?" Taoist Wild Dog muttered. "What kind of freaking tune is that?" "It's very scary." Luo Shirzhen snorted. "This demonic tune isn't just for scaring people." Back then, Concubine Yin was in danger. The devil had used this reverse blood-burning heart song to kill countless people. Fortunately, I woke you all up in time and interrupted her playing. Otherwise, all of you would have died with your hearts ruptured. His eyes were cold as he stared at the white-clothed woman. "Who are you?" The woman in white spat softly and said, "You broke into my house, and you still ask me who I am? Don't think that you're powerful just because you've broken the inverse blood-burning heart song. If my master had played it with the Blood God Sutra, none of you would have survived. Of course, trash characters like you don't deserve to hear my master play it himself. You are Concubine Yin's disciple." Luo Shirzhen's expression changed greatly. Concubine Yin only took in one disciple. You are the 9-tailed jade fox Gu Yulian." The white-clothed woman, Gu Yulian, chuckled. "Looks like you're not that stupid after all. But I really hate this nickname, so you better not mention it again. Now, while I'm still happy, get lost." A Taishan sect disciple shouted, "Nine-tailed jade fox, you're only Wei Sichin's disciple, not her. How dare you be so disrespectful to martial Uncle Luo?" Gu Yulian glanced at that person and said indifferently, "Mentioning my master's name is a crime that cannot be punished." No one saw how she moved, but her figure was like a withered leaf, floating down from the cliff. Her silk ribbon fluttered in the air, and her slender hand was slightly raised in a graceful posture. "Be careful, focus your mind," Luo Shirzhen shouted, but he was a step too late. The disciple who had just looked at Gu Yulian was already red in the face and ears. He stumbled forward a few steps and reached out to catch Gu Yulian, like a monkey picking the moon. Luo Shirzhen suddenly pulled out his long sword and stabbed through the air, accurate and ruthless. However, Gu Yulian's white ribbon was like a soft whip under the infusion of inner strength. With a swoosh, it diverted the long sword. Amidst everyone's cries of alarm, Gu Yulian's feet stepped on the head of the disciple who had rushed out. Blood gushed out of the latter's 7 orifices as he froze in place. "Witch, get out of the way!" Another level 8 leader, who was also an elder of the Taishan sect, shouted and cursed as he brandished his sword to attack. Gu Yulian chuckled. Her white figure flashed and floated away from the head of the male disciple who was bleeding from his 7 orifices. She slowly landed on the treetops. As for the male disciple, his body seemed to have no bones. He hung limply and no longer made a sound. "Witch, you!" Luo Shirzhen angrily pointed his halberd at her. Gu Yulian plucked a green leaf and casually played with it. She casually said, "If we don't leave now, then we'll all die here." Luo Shirzhen restrained his anger and said in a low voice, "Let's go." Another elder of the Taishan sect seemed unwilling. Luo Shirzhen said in a low voice, "The Bai family thief has the protection of the Witch of the Blood God Palace. We can't touch him. With the strength of a lone army, we have no chance of winning against the 9-tailed jade fox. Let's first meet up with the martial arts community and then think of a plan." In fact, Luo Shirzhen was secretly calculating. With the strength of the Taishan sect, even if they couldn't win against Gu Yulian, they could at least delay her until the experts of the Thunder Fire Hall and the Huijian sect arrived. However, if that happened, most of their people would be injured or killed. After weighing the pros and cons, Luo Shirzhen still didn't want to be the one to stand out. Otherwise, it would be difficult to explain to the sect master. Seeing the people of the Taishan sect leave, Gu Yulian glanced sideways at Bai Xiaowen. You're finally willing to come? There seemed to be a trace of hidden bitterness in her tone. Coupled with Gu Yulian's devastatingly beautiful appearance, it was hard for any man to avoid feeling self-reproach and protect her. However, Bai Xiaowen knew that this was Gu Yulian's method. He was secretly shocked. From Gu Yulian's several appearances, he had already seen some of this woman's methods. Whether it was the inverse blood-burning heart song or the martial arts of the ribbon just now, it couldn't be separated from the word charm. If it were a woman who walked with misty eyes and seduction, it wouldn't be so scary if she used a pretentious method of charm. However, Gu Yulian's temperament was as dignified as jade. She was 100 times purer than a heroine of the righteous path. That kind of charm that seemed to be unintentionally revealed was completely natural. Her lethality towards men was extremely terrifying. Bai Xiaowen guarded his mind and hypnotized himself over and over again, imagining Gu Yulian in front of him as a pile of bones or a pile of feces. This method was effective. His voice calmed down and he simply responded. The Blood God Palace kidnapped my family. I had to come. Chapter 743. Gu Yulian was lovely and moving, but Bai Xiaowen didn't fall for it. Miss Gu, you don't have to pretend to be confused. The family I'm talking about is the maid you kidnapped in Stone Tablet Valley. After the disaster that destroyed my family, the 3 people who still followed me, I see them as family. Bai Xiaowen said. Gu Yulian nodded, that makes sense. Bai Xiaowen looked straight at Gu Yulian and said in a serious tone, then, all of this was your plan, right? Where did this come from? Gu Yulian's original innocent expression disappeared and quietly asked Bai Xiaowen. Her temperament instantly changed from that of a pitiful Xiao Bai bunny to a flawless jade. Bai Xiaowen carefully observed Gu Yulian and said lightly, since Miss Gu wants to test me so much, then I'll show off a little. When the 3 of us killed Zhang Sun Ming and the others, Miss Gu suddenly appeared to stop us. This wasn't an accident, but a good opportunity you found after waiting for a long time. This was one of the parts of your plan. The whole process started from when I appeared at the heart cleansing pool. Of course, Miss Gu knew me even earlier. Perhaps you received the report from the servants in Thousand Snake Valley and became curious about me. Forgive me for being rude, but at the heart cleansing pool, I'm afraid it wasn't a coincidence that I saw you bathing. Not long after I pretended to be an ordinary person and hanged myself, you returned to the heart cleansing pool and followed me all the way here. You should have some kind of detection method and knew that my maid Bai Rui went to find the 3 major sections. From there, you deduced my plan, which was to make Zhang Sun Ming and the others lose their reputation in the righteous path. Therefore, you ordered the people of Blood God Palace to set up an ambush in Stone Tablet Valley and ruthlessly schemed against the 3 major sects. Yes, with the newly joined Jiuhua sect and Taishan sect, there should be experts from the 5 major sections. You also deliberately let people take Bai Rui away when there were bystanders. The 5 major sects were suspicious of Bai Rui and felt that she led everyone into the ambush. However, his suspicions weren't too deep yet. You also intervened and let the old man of Guzhan escape. After he met up with the 5 major sects, you led everyone to the place where Zhang Sun Ming and Yi Shiyuan were buried. Naturally, you confirmed that I killed the masters of the righteous faction and colluded with the Blood God Palace. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath and finally said, this time at the heart cleansing pond, you came forward to force the Taishan sect's experts to retreat. I'm afraid you don't have any good intentions. With the people of the Taishan sect personally witnessing it, I, Bai Wen, will never be able to remove the name of a traitor of the Blood God Palace. Miss Gu, am I right? Han Su and Li Shi both looked at Gu Yulian in surprise. They had not expected this seemingly ethereal woman in white to be so scheming. Gu Yulian was stunned for a while. She looked at Bai Xiaowen from head to toe and showed a trace of appreciation. She smiled and said, all right. You are very good. It seems that I still underestimated you. You will be my right-hand man. Li Shi was a little angry that he was tricked by her. He said, hey, you think too highly of yourself. Why do you think we will definitely join the Blood God Palace and listen to your orders? Gu Yulian did not care about the identity of Li Shi's maid because Bai Xiaowen had already stated that Bai Jiao, Bai Yi and Bai Rui were his family. After hearing Li Shi's question, Gu Yulian just smiled and said, "Little sister, do you still have a choice now?" Li Shi was discouraged. Bai Xiaowen said lightly, "You are wrong. I still have a last choice. I can take you or any of the leaders of the 3 peaks and 4 valleys of the Blood God Palace and go to the Righteous Faction Alliance." When Gu Yulian faced the people of the Taishan sect, her methods were unfathomable, but Bai Xiaowen already knew her true strength. Gu Yulian could only divert the sword of the level 8 leader of the Taishan sect, Luo Shizhen. Bai Xiaowen guessed that Gu Yulian's strength was not at the Lord level. She was at most a level 9 leader, the same level as the leaders of the 3 peaks and 4 valleys. As for the charm method, Bai Xiaowen had his own way of dealing with it. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen's threat was not baseless. Gu Yulian tilted her head and said, "Interesting. Let's not talk about whether you have the ability or not. Even if you do, don't you care about the safety of your little maid?" Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, "Bai Rui will be fine. Even if she is in danger, she can use a special treasure to escape." "Are you joking?" Gu Yulian obviously did not believe him. Bai Xiaowen calmly took out a town return scroll. "I never joke. This is an array charm?" Gu Yulian's expression changed slightly. She could feel that the town return scroll was not an ordinary item. The background of each plane was different, causing the cognitive structure of the people in the spiritual world to be different. The rules of the spiritual world would also turn items that were incompatible in a certain plane into similar items with the style of that plane by default. For example, Bai Xiaowen's Desert Eagle was turned into a crossbow by default. Delifa, which looked like a winged angel, was the legendary raven girl, Crow Tengu, in the eyes of the people in the spiritual world. The sword song plane also had strange arrays and charms, such as controlling the 6 Ding and 6 Jia, summoning the wind and rain, and casting beans to form soldiers, etc. But because the Taoist magic of the sword song plane was not obvious, these strange abilities were all classified as special techniques, which were rarely seen by ordinary people. There were also some incredible martial arts. The most representative was the Qiankuan mind technique of Ling Dushu, the Qiankuan Zhenren, which had the effect of shrinking the ground into an inch. This could already be regarded as a quasi-immortal technique. In fact, the Wuxia plane was the lower plane corresponding to the Xianxia plane. And this town return scroll, in Gu Yulian's eyes, was a charm with the ability to shrink the ground into an inch. This kind of special technique treasure should be rare, right? Gu Yulian said with some doubt. She did not think that Bai Rui, a maid, would have this kind of charm. Bai Xiaowen signaled to Li Shi, who understood and also took out an identical charm, Town Return Scroll. Bai Rui also has this charm. If she really encounters danger, she will directly use the charm and leave the range of Mount Yan. "Miss Gu, if you want to use Bai Rui to threaten me, I'm afraid you will only make me an enemy for no reason." Seeing that Li Shi, who was also a maid, also took out this charm, Gu Yulian finally believed him. Chapter 744. Bai Xiaowen showed a thoughtful expression and remained silent. Gu Yulian continued, "Why don't you join the Blood God Palace? Then you will have the capital to fight against the Infinite Sword sect. In time, not to mention the head of Guzhen, even the life of the head of the Infinite Sword sect will not be difficult to take." The spiritual realm's rules prompted Concubine Yin's disciple, the young master of the Blood God Palace, Gu Yulian, has sent you an official invitation. Do you agree? If you choose yes, you will leave the righteous faction and join the evil faction. Warning, this action will have an unknown impact on your reputation in the 2 factions and the favorability of important figures in the spiritual realm. Please choose carefully. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath. How can I not avenge my father's death? Even if I join the Blood God Palace, I will not refuse. He directly chose yes. The spiritual realm's rules prompted, you have joined the evil faction. Your reputation in the righteous faction has decreased. Your current reputation level is hostile, hidden. This hostile relationship will take effect when your new faction identity is revealed. Your reputation in the evil faction, Blood God Palace, has increased. Your current reputation level is neutral. Gu Yulian's favorability towards you has increased. Her current favorability level is friendly. Gu Yulian smiled and said, I knew young Master Bai would make a wise choice. Bai Xiaowen said, we are only temporarily establishing a cooperative relationship based on a common enemy. We can help each other without affecting our main goals. Gu Yulian raised her eyebrows slightly. Young Master Bai, what do you mean? Do you think that you and I represent the Blood God Palace as equals? Bai Xiaowen said calmly, if you can fully control the power of the Blood God Palace, I certainly dare not say that we are equals. The question is, can you? Gu Yulian carefully looked at Bai Xiaowen for a while before smiling. Nothing can be hidden from young Master Bai's eyes. Well, I admit that the Blood God Palace is still unstable internally. You and I are partners of equal status. I need you to help me seize the power of the Blood God Palace. In return, I will help you take revenge. Concubining shouldn't be in the Blood God Palace, right? Bai Xiaowen asked again. This time, Gu Yulian did not beat around the bush. She nodded her head straightforwardly. Master has already left for several months. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, sure enough. Bai Xiaowen deduced that concubining was not in the Blood God Palace, which caused the internal instability of the Blood God Palace. Gu Yulian did not fully control the power of the Blood God Palace, which was also a result of this. If Gu Yulian was really in charge of the Blood God Palace, she would not have such a strong desire to recruit a nobody like Bai Xiaowen. Where did concubining go? Bai Xiaowen noticed that when Gu Yulian mentioned concubining, she used the word left instead of disappeared. This meant that she knew where concubining went. Gu Yulian sighed, this is Master's privacy. Young Master Bai, please don't ask anymore. In short, this time, the alliance of the righteous sects is besieging the Blood God Peak. We can't count on Master. You want to control the power of the Blood God Palace. What qualifications do you have? Bai Xiaowen asked directly, how many leaders of the 7 divisions of the Blood God Palace support you? Gu Yulian's expression darkened slightly. She shook her head and said, Master left in a hurry. She only left an oral instruction and the key to the arsenal for me to control the 7 divisions of the Blood God Palace. But the 7 leaders have their own thoughts. They don't think highly of me as their young master. Gu Yulian's gloomy expression made even Li Shui, who was a woman, feel sour in her heart and sympathize with her. However, Bai Xiaowen was still not polite. He added, that is to say, you have no foundation at the moment. You are like an emperor who holds the imperial seal but has no soldiers and no courage in his hands. Gu Yulian bit her lips and nodded gently. She said, that's why I need you to help me. Bai Xiaowen was about to speak when he suddenly received another prompt. Hero Side Mission, Master of the Blood God Palace, activated. Mission objective, assist Gu Yulian to obtain the support of more than half of the 7 divisions of the Blood God Palace. Mission difficulty, B. Mission duration, none, equal to the remaining time you stay in the Sword Song Plain. Mission reward, unknown. Since we are partners, of course I will help you. However, I want an equivalent reward after you achieve your wish. Bai Xiaowen chose to accept the mission of Master of the Blood God Palace. Gu Yulian said cheerfully, of course. In the distance, the sound of footsteps of varying severity sounded. Bai Xiaowen and Gu Yulian discovered the approaching crowd almost at the same time. Based on the number and position of the enemy, they should be the masters of the 5 righteous sections. We can't stay here for long, Bai Xiaowen said. Gu Yulian said, follow me. She tiptoed and jumped directly into the heart-cleansing pool. Like a mermaid, she dived into the pool. Although Bai Xiaowen and the other 2 were surprised, they had no time to ask. They jumped into the water at the same time and followed. The 4 of them held their breath and dived in the water. Bai Xiaowen's spiritual power sensed Gu Yulian's movements. She seemed to have drummed somewhere at the edge of the pool. Suddenly, the pool water began to flow. Gu Yulian also dived in with the flow of the water. Bai Xiaowen understood and led Han Su and Li Shi to follow closely. The four of them passed through a secret door and dived for a while. The ground gradually rose. After a few minutes, the four of them poked their heads out of the water one after another. Bai Xiaowen wiped the water droplets off his face. Seeing Gu Yulian's beautiful appearance, his heart skipped a beat. He quickly chanted the 5-word mantra in his heart. "You are a piece of shit, you are a piece of shit." Seeing Bai Xiaowen's lips move, Gu Yulian asked in surprise, "What are you chanting?" Bai Xiaowen coughed. "Nothing. Where are we now?" Gu Yulian was diverted from the topic. She replied, "This is the secret passage to the Blood God Mountain. It is also connected to the armory of the Blood God Palace. Apart from the past palace lords, no one knows the location of this secret passage." The four of them left the waterway and walked along the secret passage. Gu Yulian walked at the front. Her white dress was soaked in water and clung to her body, revealing her curvaceous figure. No one dared to look at her for too long. This secret passage was extremely long. After walking for a long time and passing through many forks, Gu Yulian finally stopped. "We're here." She took out a flint and lit up the whale oil lamp hanging on the wall. In front of them was a 3-meter-tall door made of bronze. It was unusually thick. In the middle of the heavy bronze door, there were 2 fist-sized grooves. "What's behind the door?" Li Shi asked. Gu Yulian took out a jade ball. She spun it gently and split it into 2. Then, she inserted them into the grooves and turned them gently. She smiled. "This is my sincerity." Chapter 745. The jade ball in Gu Yulian's hand was obviously the key to the Blood God Palace's arsenal. After turning the key, a circular bronze plate in the middle of the heavy bronze door opened, revealing a golden wheel inside. The golden wheel was 1 foot in diameter, and the 12 zodiac signs were engraved around it. More importantly, with the appearance of the golden wheel, the surrounding ground also rumbled and shook. The stone slabs on the mountain walls and the dome automatically moved away, revealing deep holes. "What kind of mechanism is this?" Bai Xiaowen looked around cautiously. Gu Yulian glanced at Bai Xiaowen and said, "Behind the door is the most secret place of the Blood God Palace, and there is no one guarding it. Of course, we have to set up a powerful mechanism. The jade ball in my hand can only let us see the 12 primordial golden wheel. Next, we have to move the wheel needle in the correct order 7 times to open the door of the arsenal." After a pause, Gu Yulian continued, "In these 7 turns, we have to move the wheel needle to the correct image of the primordial golden wheel. If there is a mistake, the arsenal's mechanism will be triggered immediately." Although Gu Yulian did not say what the arsenal's mechanism would look like after it was triggered, Bai Xiaowen felt a chill down his spine when he looked at the dark holes around him. This golden wheel was equivalent to a 12-digit, 7-digit password box. There were more than 30 million possible combinations, but only one was correct. The wisdom of the ancient craftsmen of Huaxia was absolutely not to be underestimated. "Young Master Bai, please step aside. I'm not used to people standing too close to me," Gu Yulian said. Bai Xiaowen knew that she was trying to protect the secret of the wheel needle, so he did not mind and stepped aside. However, from the corner of his eye, he firmly remembered every movement of Gu Yulian's fingers. Bai Xiaowen remembered the range of her movements. There was a slight difference between moving from the Z Shu position to the Chou Ox position and moving to the Yin Tiger position. Through the range of movements, Bai Xiaowen could calculate which zodiac sign the needle was pointing to after each move. Even before Bai Xiaowen became an awakened, he was able to use his abnormal memory to replicate the movements of a pharmacist. He was able to recreate the complicated process and successfully concoct the medicine. Now that he had become an awakened, his eyesight, hearing, and spiritual senses had greatly improved. Although the lighting was dim and he was quite far away, it was still easy for him to copy Gu Yulian's movements. Bai Xiaowen didn't have any bad intentions, but it was better to be prepared. He still didn't have 100% trust in Gu Yulian. After 7 revolutions, the heavy bronze door rumbled and slowly slid into the mountain wall. The surrounding mechanism holes were also quietly hidden behind the stone slabs. Huh! There's a light behind the door. Is there someone inside? Li Shi asked in the teen channel. The group of people filed in. Gu Yulian pressed the button again, and the heavy bronze door slowly closed. Bai Xiaowen glanced at the wall lamps that were placed every few steps and replied in the teen channel, "No, these oil lamps should be eternal." "How much oil is needed?" Li Shi muttered. Bai Xiaowen said helplessly, "In comparison, shouldn't you be more concerned about the oxygen supply? The existence of these oil lamps means that this armory isn't airtight. Air can still circulate from the outside." The armory was very spacious. There weren't rows of bookshelves with martial arts manuals as expected. There were only stone pillars, each pillar as thick as two people hugging it. There were engravings on the stone pillars. Some were figures of people, some were figures of meridians. There were also small annotations next to them. Bai Xiaowen came to one of the stone pillars. There were 4 large words engraved on the top of the pillar, "Phaseless Magic." There were also a few lines of small words below, "Phaseless Magic, the world's first-class internal energy cultivation method. When practiced to the realm of great success, it was invisible and formless. It could freely simulate and display the martial arts of various sects and schools, and its power would be even stronger. It was less effective in simulating martial arts of the concept, but it was a fly in the ointment, sand. Below it were diagrams of the human body's meridians and annotations. Bai Xiaowen was engrossed in reading. Beside him, Gu Yulian smiled and said, "Phaseless magic was engraved by the second Shachi Palace Lord. If you want to succeed in this internal energy cultivation method, you'll need 10 years of hard work. Young Master Bai has already missed the best age to practice internal energy. Even if you start working hard now, it's already too late." Bai Xiaowen's heart skipped a beat. He said, "Since you know that I can't practice it, then where's your sincerity?" Gu Yulian said, "It's not easy to learn internal energy cultivation methods. However, the armory contains the martial arts experiences of past palace lords. Any one of these martial arts can dominate for a period of time. Young Master Bai only needs to choose a set of martial arts that doesn't require the use of internal energy." As she spoke, Gu Yulian walked to the side of one of the stone pillars. She gently knocked on the stone pillar and said, "For example, this flowing cloud sword technique is the ultimate technique of the Jiuhua sect. When practiced to the realm of great success, the sword moves will be as smooth as moving clouds and flowing water. It can be ranked as one of the top 3 fastest sword techniques in the world. The best part is that the flowing cloud sword technique doesn't require the use of internal energy. It only requires the user to be nimble enough and have a strong enough body to withstand the burden of extremely high sword speed." Bai Xiaowen silently nodded. The flowing cloud sword technique was definitely the type that increased the attack speed during the execution. It was more suitable for Li Shi. Hearing the words "top 3 fastest sword techniques in the world," Bai Xiaowen suddenly thought of something. He said, "Is the collection of martial arts in this armory very complete? Is there a breaking water sword technique?" Gu Yulian smiled. "I knew young Master Bai would ask this question. There is a collection of the breaking water sword technique, but it only contains the set of sword moves. There is no matching breaking water sword intent. Besides, even if there is, you don't have internal energy. You can't practice the breaking water sword intent." Bai Xiaowen said, "Then how can a person like me practice internal energy?" "One word, difficult." Gu Yulian shook her head. "You're already an adult. Your meridians are blocked. If you want to practice internal energy, you need to open up your meridians first. The prerequisite for opening up your meridians is to have internal energy. This is a difficult problem with no solution. Can't I use external forces?" Bai Xiaowen's heart itched. In wuxia novels, there was a story about a top master helping to open up the Ren and Du meridians. Gu Yulian obviously understood Bai Xiaowen's meaning. She smiled and said, "When external forces enter the body, the resistance will increase by 10 times. For example, scratching an itch through one's boot. Although the force is strong, it can't be fully expressed. Only a top master like my master can do it. However, if you want to ask that kind of master to help you open up your meridians, it's even more impossible. Then what about swallowing natural treasures? For example, 1,000-year-old Ganoderma lucidum. Bai Xiaowen fully displayed the spirit of asking questions if he didn't understand. Han Su's eyes also lit up. Gu Yulian completely couldn't understand Bai Xiaowen and the other's endless desire for internal energy. She just said helplessly, first of all, natural treasures are extremely rare. Even if the medicinal power is too strong, it will break your meridians before you can open them up. If you rashly swallow it, the spiritual medicine will be poison. Okay. Bai Xiaowen actually didn't give up, but he didn't want to ask anymore. Everyone walked in the martial arts library. Gu Yulian kept explaining the origins of the martial arts on the stone pillars. Some of these martial arts were collected by the previous palace masters when they challenged various sections. However, most of them were created by the previous palace masters by combining the strengths of various sections. It could be said that the martial arts recorded on each stone pillar were superior martial arts of the sword song plane. The lowest level was on the same level as in Jianfan's flying shadow swordsmanship. When they were about to reach the end, they saw blank stone pillars. There were no more martial arts inscribed on them. At the end of the martial arts library, there was a jade bed. Beside it were bowls, basins, and other daily necessities. It added a hint of life to this solemn martial arts library. Gu Yulian came to a stone pillar near the jade bed. She stroked the pillar and said, "This is the place where the fifth palace master, recorded the martial arts." She usually had a great regret, so she worried about it. She spent very little time cultivating in the martial arts library. She also left behind the least martial arts records. Bai Xiaowen approached the jade bed, but Gu Yulian stopped him. "Don't come near," Gu Yulian said in a low voice. The Blood God Palace's Blood God Sutra is hidden in the jade bed. Only the palace master can learn this divine art. Bai Xiaowen was slightly startled. He then smiled and said, "Miss, you are really sincere to me. You don't even hide this kind of secret. Aren't you afraid that I will suddenly turn hostile and steal the Blood God Sutra?" Gu Yulian was unusually calm. "What's the use of stealing the Blood God Sutra? You won't be able to cultivate it. Besides, even if you can cultivate it and become invincible, you won't be able to walk out of the martial arts library." Bai Xiaowen glanced at the heavy bronze door of the martial arts library. "Do I need to activate the mechanism to walk out of the martial arts library?" Gu Yulian nodded. Obviously, only she knew how to activate the mechanism. No wonder she was so calm. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and smiled. "No wonder you closed the door after entering. You are so careful. I can't be careless when dealing with someone as smart as young Master Bai." Gu Yulian smiled. Bai Xiaowen said, "All right, I was just joking. You said that only the palace master can learn the Blood God Sutra. Do you know it yourself?" Gu Yulian shook her head. "Master doesn't allow me to learn it. That's a bit troublesome." Bai Xiaowen frowned. "If you can learn the Blood God Sutra, it should be much easier to obtain the approval of the 3 peaks and 4 valleys. In a sense, it should be a symbol of the palace master and also represents strength." Gu Yulian said indifferently, "Master's self-created jade forging art is also a first-class internal technique. Since you have been designated as the next palace master, why don't you activate the jade bed and learn the Blood God Sutra? This will greatly reduce the difficulty of our seizing power." Bai Xiaowen said. Gu Yulian shook her head. "If Master doesn't allow me to learn it, I won't learn it." "Concubining isn't here," Bai Xiaowen wanted to say more, but Gu Yulian waved her hand to stop him. "I'm not an obedient disciple and often make Master angry. However, I definitely won't do anything that Master doesn't allow me to do." She said that the Blood God Sutra is too bloody and goes against the laws of nature. Those who cultivate it will either be alone for the rest of their lives or die a horrible death. That's why she racked her brains to create the jade forging art and teach it to me. Bai Xiaowen came to a realization. As the ancient Huaxia plane, the sword song plane was very particular about the relationship between master and disciple. There was a saying that a master for a day was a father for life. Disciples naturally had great respect for their master. Thinking about the words deceiving one's master and destroying one's ancestors, the sin of deceiving one's master was actually the same as destroying one's ancestors. One could see how much influence this moral tradition of the ancient Huaxia plane had. Of course, most masters also did their best to treat their disciples as their own children. For example, concubine Yin and Gu Yulian were master and disciple. Is this Blood God Sutra really that evil? Bai Xiaowen didn't really believe it. This was simply a feudal superstition. Gu Yulian said, "Master is right. Since the first palace master, Sha Qianhai, every palace master had unparalleled divine power, but they didn't have a family member to accompany them until the end. They were often depressed, and some even died suddenly in their prime. Even master is the same. You said that concubine Yin had a great regret. What are the details?" Bai Xiaowen asked. "If it's not convenient to say, then forget it." Gu Yulian's tone was calm. "Actually, this matter isn't much of a secret. There's no harm in telling you in detail. However, as a disciple, I can't arbitrarily talk about master's matters. I'll tell you briefly. Master's parents died in the hands of the man she loved the most. The 3 members of the White Phoenix squad were all shocked. Li Shi muttered, "That's too scary. Wouldn't concubining hate that man for the rest of her life? Maybe it was an accident, or someone framed her." Bai Xiaowen stood from the man's point of view and proposed another possibility. Gu Yulian sneered. "Framed?" Master saw with her own eyes that man killed her mother. Her father was also seriously injured and eventually died. This matter was witnessed by hundreds and thousands of martial arts heroes. "Tell me, how did you frame him?" Bai Xiaowen was speechless. He didn't expect Gu Yulian's reaction to be so fierce. It seemed that Gu Yulian empathized with concubine Yin's experience, so she also had a deep hatred for that man. "Well, this matter ends here. Don't mention it again." Gu Yulian quickly restrained her emotions and showed a faint smile again, as flawless as a white jade. She waved her hand and said, "Young Master Bai, you have seen my sincerity. As long as you help me seize the power of Blood God Palace, you can choose any martial arts here. Of course, Blood God scripture is not included." "Okay." Bai Xiaowen nodded without hesitation. The group left the armory and walked along the underground passage for an unknown amount of time. At the end of the passage, there was a spiral staircase made of stone slabs that led upwards. Gu Yulian walked up the stairs and said softly, "Do you know where the staircase leads to?" Bai Xiaowen's eyes flashed. "Blood God Mountain?" Gu Yulian nodded slightly. Not only Blood God Mountain, but also the main hall of Blood God Palace, behind the palace master's throne. Bai Xiaowen took a breath. "My maid. Bai Rui is also in Blood God Palace?" Chapter 746. Walking out of the secret passage, the group appeared in the main hall of the Blood God Palace. At this time, there was no one in the main hall, but Bai Xiaowen could sense with his spiritual power that there were 2 people standing straight at the entrance of the main hall. They should be the guards of the main hall. Gu Yulian went straight to the door and saw the 2 gatekeepers. "Young Master." The 2 servants were surprised to see Gu Yulian. They probably didn't know when Gu Yulian entered the main hall. "No need to be so polite. Go and find Chief Steward Qin. Also, bring the girl from Stone Tablet Valley." Gu Yulian ordered, and then said to Bai Xiaowen, "The Blood God Peak is an important place of the Blood God Palace, and Master has no interest in worldly affairs, so Chief Qin Hui usually acts on behalf of him. He can be regarded as one of the 7 division leaders." Bai Xiaowen said, "Since he is the confidant of concubine Yin, then he should support you, young master." Gu Yulian shook her head and said, not necessarily. After talking for a while, a middle-aged man suddenly laughed. Young master, you are really elusive. Now that the enemy is in front of us, it's better not to move around so as to avoid being killed by the hypocrites of the righteous faction. Bai Xiaowen looked in the direction of the voice. A tall and thin middle-aged man, wearing a luxurious brocade robe, turned around a pavilion and came over. Behind the man in brocade robe, there were two servants on duty, half escorting and half protecting a person, who happened to be Qiao Rui. Qiao Rui saw Bai Xiaowen from afar, and her eyes showed surprise. She didn't suffer any abuse and was in good spirits. And with the existence of the team channel, Bai Xiaowen and Qiao Rui understood each other's situation as soon as they met. On the other side, Gu Yulian and the man in brocade robe, who was the chief steward of the Blood God Peak, also spoke and asked, Chief Steward Qin, you have worked hard these days. What is the situation now? Is there any movement from the righteous faction's 7 sects? Qin Hui said, Young master, the righteous faction's 7 sects led those who followed the trend. You? Bai Baiing? Yeah? Song Yu? Go? Flashes V? Aojian Rong Yu Ji Rong Yu Ji Xiang Hui? Ibaraki Teranaji? Black Shoes? What? Tozaiza? Fern? Was the actinomyces celestial carapace hard work? Scandium? Hydra? Heartfelt gathas? Is that true? Soul? What the hell? Playing dirty? Return? Yuan Jiao Jiao had hemorrhoids? Pop? What? The old bridge withered and sputtered. Where are the leaders of the 7 righteous sects? Have you seen any of them appear? Gu Yulian asked. Qin Hui said, the day before yesterday, we received a tip-off that the Limitless Sword sect leaders Wei Yunxian appeared in Luanzhou. Other than that, the leaders of the other 6 major sects have yet to appear. Gu Yulian nodded and said, this time, the 7 righteous sects besieged the Divine Palace. The Infinite Sword sect is the happiest. Zui Yunxian, that old man, will definitely come out. The sect leaders of the other 6 sects had to stay in their respective sects, so not all of them were present. In this regard, we need to increase our investigation efforts and spread out our informants. Qin Hui sighed. If the palace master is here, even if all the sect leaders of the 7 sects come, the Divine Palace will not be afraid at all. This time, don't expect master to come and save the day. She has an extremely important matter to do, and the degree of danger is no less than facing the 7 major sections. Gu Yulian said lightly, and then looked at Bai Xiaowen. I'm right, right? Take a look at this maid of yours. Did she hurt a single hair? Bai Xiaowen had already talked to Qiao Rui, so he naturally understood that Qiao Rui was only under house arrest and had not been wronged. This was also the reason why Qiao Rui did not use the town return scroll. Thank you. Bai Xiaowen cupped his fists. Qin Hui had just noticed Bai Xiaowen, but he had been questioned by Gu Yulian, so he did not have time to ask. Now that he caught a gap in the conversation, he frowned and asked, who is this friend, and why is he at the Blood God Peak? His name is Bai Wen, and he was originally the young master of the Duanshui Villa. Gu Yulian continued, now he has joined the Blood God Palace, so he is not an outsider. Bai Wen. Isn't that the person who defeated the master of the Thousand Snake Valley and rescued a group of righteous faction masters? Qin Hui was suddenly hostile. Gu Yulian said lightly, that was then and this is now. Chief Steward Qin, don't ask too much. Qin Hui could only nod, and then said, young master, when you sent someone to call me, I was at the Sword Discourse Cliff. Peak Master Xing was also there, testing a new puppet mechanism. When he heard that you had arrived, he invited you to take a look. Gu Yulian smiled. What new thing does Peak Master Xing have? Okay. It's good to see something new. Qin Hui walked first, and Gu Yulian led Bai Xiaowen and the others to follow. Gu Yulian said, Peak Master Xing's full name is Xing Jiyu, and he is the master of the Tianji Peak. He is also the oldest of the 7 division masters. When he joined the Blood God Palace, the Palace Master was only in the third generation. Although Peak Master Sheng's name has the word stupid in it, he is a very intelligent person. He is proficient in astronomy, geography, mathematics, and law, and he is best at making mechanical devices. He is known as the Tianji Miracle Hand. Bai Xiaowen nodded, and said in a low voice, "While we are here, I would like to ask you to tell me about the other division masters." Gu Yulian nodded slightly. Since Bai Xiaowen wanted to help her obtain the support of more than half of the 7 divisions, then he must have information about the division masters. Gu Yulian then told Bai Xiaowen the names of the other division masters, the names of the divisions they controlled, and the areas they were good at. Besides Blood God Peak's steward Qin Hui, Tianji Peak's master Tianji Miracle Hand Xingjiu, Thousand Snake Valley's master Poisonous Guanyin Ji Mingjue, and Cleansing Sword Valley's master Flying Shadow Sword Master Ing Jianfan, there were 3 more division masters. The one in charge of Lingyun Peak was Peak Master Ji Ming. He was good at Qinggong and was known as Yen Mountain's Flying Swan. The one in charge of Huan Flower Valley was Valley Master Kong Qin. She was good at disguising and using hidden weapons. She was known as Thousand Faces and Thousand Hands. The one in charge of Thunder Valley was Valley Master Quang Wei. He was good at using explosives and was known as Thunderclap Hand. The 7 great clan leaders all had their own unique skills. They also had many elders and elite servants under them. They were like the 7 feudal lords of a feudal dynasty. It was normal for them to not think much of Gu Yulian, a young clan leader who only had a righteous title. The group walked slowly. Occasionally they would come across a steep area, but they all had stone stairs. It was clear that the Blood God Palace had been operating on Yen Mountain for a long time. Sword Discourse Cliff was very close to them. It was an open space with a radius of several hundred zhang. On the side of the cliff, there were 4 large words carved, "Only Martial Supremacy." Each word was the size of a house. The words were dark red, like dried blood. A thin old man with his back to the group was fiddling with a machine. "Peak Master Sheng, young master is here," Qin Hui reminded. The old man turned around and smiled. "You're here?" Gu Yulian seemed to be used to Shengjiu's attitude. She wasn't angry and walked over. "Peak Master Sheng, what new toy do you want to show me? Could it be a new mechanical puppet?" Shengjiu said calmly, "No rush. You'll see it later." Bai Xiaowen felt that the atmosphere was not right. Using his spiritual sense, he found that several groups of people were rushing towards the Sword Discourse Cliff. "Girl Gu is finally willing to show up?" A sharp voice sounded. Then a green figure flew through the sky. He tapped on the cliff and landed like a big bird. It was a thin man in a green robe. His eye sockets were deep, but his eyes were sharp. He was obviously the Peak Master of Lingyun Peak, Ji Ming. After he flew to the Sword Discourse Cliff, the group of Lingyun Peak experts who followed him also caught up. Gu Yulian smiled. "Peak Master Ji's lightness skill is better." Ji Ming snorted. "You have a sweet mouth, but it's useless against me. Girl Gu, the enemy is right in front of us, but you're nowhere to be seen." Now the Blood God Palace has no leader. This is all your fault. Gu Yulian smiled. "Do you all listen to me when I'm in the Blood God Palace?" Ji Ming snorted. "If you were in the Blood God Palace, we could quickly decide on the leader. There's no need to mess things up. Master gave me a token before he left and let me take charge of the 7 divisions. I'm the leader. Why do I need to choose?" Gu Yulian said. Suddenly, a loud voice sounded not far away. "The position of Palace Master is only occupied by the strong. Girl Gu, you're young and ignorant. You're weak. How can you lead the 7 divisions of the Blood God Palace?" Following this voice, a bronze-skinned, muscular man led a group of masters into the arena. Gu Yulian snorted. "So it's Thunder Valley's Valley Master Quang. Why, you don't even listen to Master?" Thunder Valley's Valley Master, Thunderclap Hand Quang Wei glared. "We didn't even see the Palace Master when he left. Who knows if you're fake? What's more, every generation of palace masters had to suppress the crowd and convince everyone to accept it wholeheartedly. On the sword discourse cliff, the words divine martial dominates the world, are they fake? That's right. Back then, when concubine Ing received the last will of Palace Lord Qin and succeeded the position of Palace Lord, she also fought 7 battles on the sword discourse cliff. She suppressed all the heroes and proved the words only martial supremacy. Everyone was convinced and recognized her as Palace Lord. Ji Ming said. In the distance, 2 groups of people wearing different clothes walked over. They were led by a man and a woman. Bai Xiaowen had already seen the man. He was the sword cleansing valley master, Ing Jianfan. The woman walked side by side with him. They were quite intimate. This woman must be the Huanhua Valley master, the thousand-faced thousand-hands Kang Qin. According to Gu Yulian, Kang Qin and Ing Jianfan were a couple. However, both of them were proud and arrogant. They didn't want to accommodate each other. Who knew how much trouble they had caused? From their intimate behavior, it was obvious that they were currently in the honeymoon period. Soon after, the 10,000 Snake Valley Master and poisonous Guanyin Ji Mingjue also arrived. However, the 10,000 Snake Valley experts following behind her were only average in strength. There was only one commander rank expert, while the rest were all elite white-clothed servants, because the 2 commanders, Chu Zhongheng and Ye Jing, had been killed. When Ji Mingjue saw Bai Xiaowen, she was stunned. Then she said angrily, "Good, you little thief. You dare to come to the Blood God Peak? You're walking right into a trap." Gu Yulian was quite responsible. She took a step forward and said lightly, "Young Master Bai has already forsaken darkness and joined the Blood God Palace. From now on, he is a member of the Blood God Palace. Let's forget about what happened in the past." Ji Mingjue snorted, "Forget about it. It's easy for you to say. Just based on this matter, I'll be the first to refuse to accept you as the palace master." Bai Xiaowen secretly complained. Was it really appropriate to use the phrase "forsaken darkness and join the light" here? Although he complained, Bai Xiaowen was secretly shocked when he saw that the leaders and elites of the 7 major tribes had all arrived. He whispered to Gu Yulian, "The situation is not good. These people seem to have a premeditated plan. Are they here to force you to abdicate?" Gu Yulian gently shook her head. She looked around and said, "The 7 righteous sects have already killed their way into the territory of the Blood God Palace. Leaders, why are you all gathered at the Sword Discourse Cliff instead of retreating?" Kuang Wei, the leader of the Thunder Valley, said, "Gu girl, stop talking nonsense. Retreating is one thing, but as the saying goes, a snake can't do without a head. Today, we must first decide on the candidate for the palace master. After we have a backbone, we can talk about retreating." "That's right. Don't mix up the priorities." Ji Ming, the leader of the Lingyun Peak, chimed in. Gu Yulian nodded slightly, "All right then. You all should first decide on the candidate who has the most support and then compete with me." Xing Jiyu, the leader of the Tianji Peak, stroked his beard and said, "Gu girl, there's no need to instigate us. The secret key and the entry formula are all with you. What's the point of us fighting here? Unless you hand over the secret key and the formula, the 7 of us will then decide who is better." The leaders of the 3 peaks and 4 valleys of the Blood God Peak were not stupid. Gu Yulian's obvious intention to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight could not be hidden from them. Gu Yulian shook her head and refused. Ji Ming shouted, "All right, you refuse to hand over the secret key. That means you are the candidate for the palace master. If you want to take the position, you have to suppress everyone and defeat all the other competitors who want to compete for the position." Bai Xiaowen's eyes flashed slightly. He whispered to Gu Yulian, "Do you have the confidence to fight the 7 leaders alone?" Gu Yulian shook her head slightly and whispered back, "These 7 people all have their own unique skills. I don't have the confidence." "Then can I represent you in the battle?" Bai Xiaowen asked again. Gu Yulian whispered back, "The subordinates of the peaks and valleys can represent the leaders in the battle. As long as you admit that you are my subordinate, you can represent me in the battle." But are you really confident? Wait, let's discuss this first. I can try to deal with Xingjiu, Jiming, Kang Qin, and Jiming. Before Bai Xiaowen finished whispering, the subordinates of the 7 leaders were already in an uproar. Listening carefully, most of them were shouting the words martial supremacy. It seemed that in the Blood God Palace, these words were deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Gu girl, don't waste time. The 7 righteous sects are now stepping up their attacks. If you delay any longer, you will be a sinner of the Blood God Palace. Qi Ming shouted, if you want to be the palace master, accept the challenge. If you don't have the guts, hand over the secret key. Now that the arrow was on the bow, it had to be released. Bai Xiaowen did not have time to discuss with Gu Yulian. He cleared his throat and said, wait, I have something to say. Scram to the side. Is there a place for you to speak at the Sword Discourse Cliff? Qi Ming said. Gu Yulian immediately said, Peak Leader Ji, why not let young Master Bai say his opinion? Chapter 747. One duel. What do you mean? Thunder Valley Master Kuang Wei asked. Bai Xiaowen smiled, it's very simple, just a few questions. The range includes Qinggong, swordsmanship, poison, mechanism techniques, and so on. These are all areas that the division masters are most proficient in. Everyone will send out one person to bet on. This way, we won't overdo it and it won't hurt the harmony. Once this was said, the experts of the 7 great tribes on the Sword Discourse Cliff looked at each other. Xingjiu was the first to react. He said, Girl Gu, you've heard what this Bai guy said. Does what he said represent what you think? Are you going to be the candidate for the palace master and accept the challenge of the one duel? Gu Yulian hesitated slightly, but with the situation today, there was no room for choice. She could only nod. Good. Now, the new Palace Master's Sword Discourse Martial Competition can officially begin. Xingjiu said, Everyone, what do you think about this proposal of the one duel? Qi Ming sneered, in terms of Qinggong, I've never been afraid of anyone. Gu girl, think carefully, this is our area of expertise. If you lose, you'll lose the position of Palace Master. Bai Xiaowen wrapped it in his spiritual power and whispered something to Gu Yulian. Gu Yulian nodded lightly and said, okay. But I have a condition. Say it. The 7 division masters saw that Gu Yulian had relented and they were all relieved. Although they were arrogant, they were actually afraid that Gu Yulian would rather die than submit. After all, she was the only disciple of concubine Yin. If something happened to her, who would take the blame? The reason why they had the guts to force her to abdicate was because concubine Yin had left for several months without any news. Everyone felt that concubine Yin would most likely not return to the Blood God Palace. But everything had a chance, so they could only follow the rules of the Blood God Palace. Taking a step back and not considering concubine Yin, if Gu Yulian destroyed the secret key, wouldn't it be a great loss to the Blood God Palace? Now that Gu Yulian had relented, it was naturally a good thing. Facing everyone's gaze, Gu Yulian said, the specific rules of each competition will be decided by us. The 7 division masters frowned. Xingjiu said, the specific rules will be decided by you? No way, no way, how can I be both an examiner and a candidate? Gu Yulian said, the topic of the literary battle has already been limited to martial arts. Regardless of whether it is Qinggong, poison, swordsmanship, hidden weapons, mechanical techniques, they are all areas of expertise. It would not be an exaggeration to say that you are the best in the world. The specific rules of the competition will be proposed by us. Are you afraid that you will lose 7 matches in a row? The 7 leaders frowned and pondered. However, Ying Jianfan was the first to speak. We'll do as you say. The Valley Master of the Huanhua Valley, Kang Qin, said, Jianfan, be careful. They might be tricking you. Ying Jianfan said indifferently, so what if it's a trap? When it comes to my match, I won't lose to anyone. These words stirred up the competitive spirit of the other division leaders. Qi Ming said, that's right. In terms of lightness techniques, whether it's the strength of the legs, the ability to soar, or the plum blossom stakes, do you think I'm afraid of them? Xing Jiyu stroked his beard. If it was a competition of mechanical techniques, he had immersed himself in it for his entire life, and was not afraid of anyone. However, Xing Jiyu still opened his mouth to add insurance. Girl Gu, you can propose a competition, but you can't be too biased, otherwise we won't recognize you. Gu Yulian received Bai Xiaowen's telepathy and made up her mind. She said, of course not. Good, then let's officially begin. The Blood God Palace has 3 peaks and 4 valleys, a total of 7 divisions. Each division has a topic. If you win all of them, everyone will recognize you as the Palace Master. Thunderclap Valley Master Kuang Wei said. However, Gu Yulian first looked at Blood God Peak's Chief Steward Qin Hui. Chief Steward Qin, you also don't accept me as the Palace Master. Do you want to challenge me? Qin Hui hesitated for a moment and said, I don't dare. Since it's Palace Master Wei's order, I will obey. Gu Yulian said, then there are only 6 divisions, 6 topics. Ji Ming said impatiently, okay, let's count it as 6. The first topic is Qinggong. Quickly tell us who to send. Gu Yulian looked at Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen stepped forward and said, me. Everyone looked at each other. Ji Ming laughed and said, interesting. Looking at your heavy steps, you probably haven't practiced Qinggong before. You don't even have much Qinggong. You want to compete with me in Qinggong? Let's draw a line. Bai Xiaowen smiled faintly and said, the competition is simple. We will climb to the top of this cliff. He pointed at the cliff with the words martial supremacy carved on it. Ji Ming sneered and said, this cliff is only a few dozen feet high. What's so difficult about it? He deliberately showed off his Qinggong. He took a deep breath and jumped into the air. This jump was close to 20 meters. When he reached the end of his ascent, Ji Ming lightly stepped on the cliff and jumped a few more feet. After a few steps, Ji Ming had already reached the top of the cliff and looked down at the heroes below. Cheers shook the sky. They were all from Lingyun Peak's people. Even the other leaders were secretly impressed. Ji Ming was known as the Flying Swan of Yan Mountain. His Qinggong was the best in the world. He really lived up to his reputation. They thought that they could also climb to the top of the cliff. However, it was hard to do what Ji Ming did. Ji Ming laughed and said with a sense of superiority, kid, it's your turn. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said loudly, wait, I haven't finished. Say it. Bai Xiaowen said, we are competing in the time it takes to fall from the top of the cliff. They all landed at the same time. Whoever landed last would be the winner. During the fall, you can't touch the cliff. Ji Ming frowned when he heard this. Falling from a height of a few dozen feet, if he didn't use any force to slow down, wouldn't he be half dead? Even if he was an expert in Qinggong, it would be difficult to defy the laws of nature after using up all his vital energy. If he was in mid-air and didn't use any force, he wouldn't be able to circulate his vital energy. Why did Ji Ming step on the cliff several times just now? The purpose was to borrow the strength to circulate his Shenqi. Only by doing so would he be able to easily ascend the cliff. Kid, I agree to this competition. You come up first. Ji Ming shouted. He secretly made up his mind. Bai Xiaowen agreed and used both his hands and feet to slowly climb the rock. Fortunately, although the cliff was steep, it was not smooth. There were many depressions for Bai Xiaowen to climb. With Bai Xiaowen's physical fitness, climbing was definitely not a problem. However, this ugly climb was completely different from the graceful swan-like figure of Qianming from before. The heroes of the Blood God Palace below sneered. Bai Xiaowen climbed to the top of the cliff with great difficulty and stood opposite Ji Ming a few feet away. The mountain wind blew and his clothes fluttered. Can we start? Ji Ming said, kid, don't try to be brave. If you fall to your death, no one will collect your corpse. Chapter 748. 3. 2, 1, Thunderclap. Valley Master Kwang Wei counted down from 3 and threw out a small black bead. Floating thunder art inner strength poured into his fingernail, and the bead exploded with a deafening sound. Ji-Ming and Bai Xiaowen jumped off the cliff at the same time. Ji-Ming took a deep breath, and his clothes suddenly swelled up like a big balloon. He hovered in the air, and his falling speed was much slower than ordinary objects. If you want to compete with me in lightness skill, I will definitely win. Ji-Ming was feeling proud when he suddenly heard a commotion from the crowd below. His heart skipped a beat, and when he hovered for the second time, he looked in Bai Xiaowen's direction. Ji-Ming was shocked and angry at the same time. Bai Xiaowen had a feather-woven cloak on his back, and he was gliding slowly in the air, falling at the same speed as Ji-Ming. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Bai Xiaowen did not know lightness skill, so how could he have the ability to glide at such a high altitude? The reason for all of this was probably because of that strange feather cloak. Although the two of them were falling at the same speed, Ji-Ming knew his own situation. At this time, his vital energy was constantly being consumed, and he had to release his inner strength to maintain the inflated posture of his clothes. Once this vital energy was used up, he would definitely accelerate his fall. Damn it! This kid came prepared. What should I do? Ji-Ming's thoughts flashed through his mind. Suddenly, he waved his arms, and his sleeves fluttered as if there was an invisible hand pushing him, and he pounced toward Bai Xiaowen in the air. No matter how strange the cloak was, as long as he could entangle this Bai Xiaowen in the air and make him land first, he would win. Anyway, the rules did not restrict him from attacking. It was just a competition of who would land later. That was Ji-Ming's idea. However, Bai Xiaowen was already prepared. When he saw Ji-Ming pouncing over, he twisted his body and changed direction without any support, dodging Ji-Ming's attack. Ji-Ming held his breath and struck out his palm across the air. With the help of the recoil, he changed his direction again and pounced on Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen was secretly impressed. He had relied on the gliding skill of the tribal feather cloak to be able to change directions so many times in the air. However, this Lingyun Peak master, Ji-Ming, had done it with his own Qingdong. The name of Yan Mountain's Feihong was well deserved. It was a pity that an expert could not defeat a cheater. Bai Xiaowen did not move at all. His tribal feather cloak fluttered, and he changed directions for the second time, almost passing by Ji-Ming. Ji-Ming was so angry that he almost shouted out loud. He had used up all of his genuine qi. Turning around, he saw Bai Xiaowen's figure getting farther and farther away from him. Suddenly, he felt his body sink and began to fall faster. Duong. Ji-Ming landed heavily on the ground, smashing out a series of cracks on the ground. He almost fainted from the fall. Fortunately, his Qingdong was excellent. The moment he touched the ground, he leaped forward and turned part of the gravity into a forward momentum. He rolled forward a few times before stopping and standing up with gritted teeth. At this moment, Bai Xiaowen was still in the air, circling in circles. 10 seconds after Ji-Ming landed, Bai Xiaowen finally landed. He put away his tribal feather cloak and put on his commander's cloak. Peak Master Ji, thank you for letting me win. Bai Xiaowen cupped his fists and smiled. Ji-Ming gritted his teeth and said, "You cheated. You relied on external forces." "I didn't say I couldn't use external forces." Bai Xiaowen shrugged and said, "The rule was only that I couldn't touch the cliff." "You didn't use Qingdong." Ji-Ming was still indignant. Ying Jianfan could not stand it anymore and said, "Peak Master Ji, no matter what the opponent used, a win is a win, a loss is a loss. As a peak master, can't you even afford to lose?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "That's right. We're competing on who will land later. As long as I land later than you, I win. What does Qingdong have to do with this?" Ji-Ming gritted his teeth and snorted, "Okay, I admit defeat." He returned to the crowd of Lingyun Peak and sat on the rattan chair prepared by the servants. He did not speak anymore. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "How have you been, Valley Mastering? Thank you for speaking up for justice." Ying Jianfan said coldly, Why, you're not going to take revenge on me? Bai Xiaowen said, I've found out that the evil person who harmed my family is a hypocrite from the Boundless Sword sect. He has nothing to do with Valley Mastering. Please forgive me for offending you at Taibai Tower. Ying Jianfan snorted and said, enough with the nonsense. I'll compete in swordsmanship for the second round. How do you want to compete? Tell me. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, that's even simpler. In this round, we'll compete to see whose swordsmanship is faster and more accurate. Both sides are not allowed to dodge or block. Both sides will stand in their positions and stab with their swords. Within 5 breaths, whichever side gets hit less will be the winner. When these words were said, there was a brief moment of silence. Tianji Peak Master Xingjiu sneered and said, good lad, you're betting your life because you can't win in swordsmanship? Only you can think of such a shameless act. How am I shameless? You're not allowed to dodge or block when competing in swordsmanship. Isn't that shameless? Bai Xiaowen said seriously, no. If you can dodge, then it's a competition of whose lightness skill is better. If you can block, then it's a competition of whose defense is stronger. It's not a pure competition of swordsmanship. The competition I proposed is the purest rule of swordsmanship. It's a competition of whose swordsmanship is faster and more accurate. Huanhua Valley Master Kong Qin said angrily, this lad has bad intentions. Jianfan's life is much more important than yours. Jianfan, don't compete with him. Ying Jianfan closed his eyes and pondered. He suddenly opened his eyes and said, I'll compete with you. Kong Qin was anxious. Ying Jianfan, however, was confident. He waved his hand to stop her and said coldly, don't be nervous. No matter who they send, I'll stab and take their life first. They won't even have a chance to attack in front of me. As for the 5 breaths time limit, it's meaningless. Kuang Wei praised, good, this is the spirit of the Flying Shadow Sword Master. Valley Mastering won't lose to anyone in terms of speed. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, in order not to hurt our friendship, let's switch to wooden swords. How about that? In a moment, the sword discourse cliff was filled with boos. Ying Jianfan glanced at Bai Xiaowen and said coldly, no need. Even if it's a wooden sword, it's still a sharp blade that can kill and drink blood in my hands. If you don't dare, then you don't have to compete. All right. Bai Xiaowen shook his head helplessly, I'm actually doing this for your own good. And, then let's begin. Our side is sending Bai Rui. Who's going to lend her a sword? A leader of the Sword Cleansing Valley mocked, you don't even have a sword, and you still dare to compete in swords. Just admit defeat. The servants of the Sword Cleansing Valley around them all clamored and ridiculed, and the scene was quite lively. Shut up. Xianli, lend your dark-edged sword to her. Ying Jianfan said. Xianli was the leader of the Sword Cleansing Valley who mocked. He was startled when he heard this, but he didn't dare to disobey Ying Jianfan's order. He could only agree and reluctantly pulled out the black sword at his waist and threw it at Xiao Rui, little girl, catch. The dark-edged sword drew a black rainbow. Xianli intended to test Xiao Rui's means. This throw was infused with genuine qi and was very powerful. In Bai Xiaowen's view, the power of this blow was even more powerful than the throwing sword of the former Royal Knight Commander of the Air and Plain, Gloria. A white shadow flashed. Gu Yulian had already rushed out and blocked in front of Xiao Rui. Her white hand flicked the blade of the sword. With a dragon's roar, the dark-edged sword shot up into the sky and then accelerated to fall. Gu Yulian's 2 fingers gently pinched the blade of the sword and handed the hilt to Xiao Rui. Thank you. Xiao Rui's face was slightly hot as she took the long sword. Everyone let out a low cry of surprise. Gu Yulian caught the blade of the dark-edged sword with her bare hands and was unscathed. She was really powerful. Poisonous Guanyin Jimingju has said, the jade forging technique created by Palace Master Wei is said to be a divine skill that can be on par with the Blood God Sutra. It really lives up to its reputation. Bai Xiaowen saw clearly that when Gu Yulian flicked the sword and held it, Her right hand suddenly turned into a jade color, as if it was carved out of real jade. At the same time, it also had incredible defensive power. It seemed that this was the mystery of the jade forging technique. Guyulian smiled and didn't answer. She retreated a few feet and gave up the arena. Ing Jianfan pulled out the flying shadow sword. This sword was like autumn water, dazzling everyone's eyes. He said lightly, although the dark-edged sword isn't as good as the flying shadow sword, it's still a first-class sword. I don't want to take advantage of you in terms of weapons. When the battle starts, I'll go all out. If you don't want to die, it's not too late to back out now. Qiao Rui held the dark-edged sword and swung it a few times to get used to the weight of the sword. This sword was a top-grade gold equipment. Its attack power was extremely high and it had a passive effect, sharp. After being hit, it would cause bleeding and have a chance to cause disability. It could be said that it was a graduate-level gold equipment. However, Qiao Rui also received a notification that she didn't have ownership of this sword and couldn't bring it out of the sword song plane. In the eyes of the heroes of the Blood God Palace, Qiao Rui's swordsmanship was not even mediocre. She was simply a layman. Ing Jianfan frowned and thought to himself, this woman doesn't know any swordsmanship, but she wants to bet her life with me. Could it be that she has some tricks up her sleeve? Forget it, no matter what tricks she has, I'll break it with one strike. I won't back out. Thank you for your kindness, Valley Master Ing. Qiao Rui held her sword and walked 5 feet in front of Ing Jianfan. Thunder Valley Master Quang Wei was still the arbiter. He shouted, 3, 2, 1. Then he looked up at the sky and threw an explosive ball. The arena was silent. No one dared to breathe. Compared to the first battle, this battle would definitely take a short time. However, it was more thrilling. Not only did they have to determine the winner, they might even die. The moment the explosive ball sounded, Ing Jianfan's flying shadow sword was already out. At this moment, Qiao Rui's hand just moved. No one could describe the speed of this sword. It was like the sudden appearance of a dragon. In the low exclamation of a few people with good eyesight, the flying shadow sword had already pierced by Rui's throat. Ing Jianfan suddenly frowned as he thrust out the sword. After countless battles, Ing Jianfan, who had pierced through many people's throats with his sword, naturally knew how it felt to pierce through a solid body. She was worried that Ing Jianfan would lose face and lose his reputation. Ing Jianfan was honest and nodded slightly, I lost. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, thank you, thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to challenge? If there is no one. Wait, let me. Huanhua Valley Lord Kang Qin stepped forward. She originally did not have much interest in the position of Palace Lord. This time, she stepped forward purely to defend Ing Jianfan. Okay, it is said that Valley Lord Kang's disguise technique is the best. Before Bai Xiaowen could finish, Kang Qin interrupted, who said we want to compete in disguise techniques? I want to compete with you in hidden weapons. She was quick-witted. Disguise techniques were easy to use. Compared to that, hidden weapons were more solid. What's more, Bai Xiaowen mentioned disguise techniques. He was most likely prepared to cheat. Chapter 749. Bai Xiaowen instructed the servants of Blood God Mountain to set up an arrow target on the side of the Sword Discourse Cliff. It was about 300 meters away from the center of the field. Behind the arrow target, there was a wooden pillar with a Qi Death Wind lamp on it. There was a candle burning inside. From Bai Xiaowen and Kang Qin's point of view, the candle was just covered by the arrow target. Kang Qin said, you want to compete who can extinguish the candle behind the arrow target? Bai Xiaowen nodded. Many of the servants and masters of Blood God Palace felt that this was quite difficult. The arrow target itself was made of wood. It was not difficult to shoot through it, but after shooting through it, the hidden weapon still had to have some energy left and not be changed by the resistance of the arrow target. If the target was close, it would be easy. But the key was that the distance between the arrow target and the candle was 300 meters. The distance was too far. Not to mention whether the hidden weapon could reach such a long range. Even if it could, would it have enough energy to shoot through the arrow target? Kang Qin smiled faintly. You deliberately placed it so far away. Do you think I can't do it? Of course not. Bai Xiaowen smiled. I haven't finished yet. We are competing to use the least number of shots to extinguish the candle without touching the arrow target. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Did they have to touch the arrow target and extinguish the candle behind the arrow target? The difficulty of this was even higher. It was not impossible to go around the arrow target and hit the candle flame, but it had to be accurately calculated. The hidden weapons had to collide with each other and change the angle. The problem was still the distance. 300 meters was too far. It was a distance that only strong bows and crossbows could reach. To rely on small hidden weapons to reach such a distance and to calculate the angle of impact of the hidden weapons, the difficulty was simply too high. Kang Qin said, Okay. Who will go first? Bai Xiaowen said, I set the question. Naturally, you go first. Kang Qin snorted and opened her palm. 2 round iron beads appeared. Watch carefully. I will use these 2 beads to extinguish the candle from 100 meters away. Kang Qin raised her hand and the first iron bead flew out. The speed of this move was not fast, but the iron bead itself had a strong lateral rotation force. It rotated slightly to the right. When the first iron bead flew halfway, Kang Qin once again raised her hand and shot out the second iron bead. As soon as he made his move, the iron ball emitted a powerful whistling sound as it pierced through the air. Moreover, it spun to the left and flew out at a speed that was twice as fast as the first iron ball. The first iron ball arrived about a foot away from the target. At this time, the second iron bead also arrived. With a clang, the 2 iron beads collided with each other. The first iron bead suddenly accelerated and flew out diagonally. With a puff, the candle in the lantern was extinguished. Sure! What a marvelous skill! On the Sword Discourse Cliff, there were cheers everywhere. Even Gu Yulian and Bai Xiaowen felt that Kang Qin's hidden weapon skills had reached the realm of perfection. She could do whatever she wanted. After all, there was a distance of 300 meters between them. Furthermore, he had to calculate the angle and go around the target. This was many times better than the so-called shooting a willow leaf from 100 paces away. Kang Qin's face was slightly smug. She looked at Bai Xiaowen and said, I just used it twice. It's your turn now. Who is it? Bai Xiaowen took a step forward. It's me this time. Murmurs could be heard from the crowd. Kang Qin had already reached her limit by blowing out the candles twice. No matter how powerful this gigolo named Baiwen was, could he make the hidden weapon travel 300 meters and turn around to blow out the candles in one hit? Kang Qin would have to use it at least twice. She was already in an invincible position. But if she didn't lose, she would win. No matter if Gu Yulian's side lost or tied, they wouldn't be able to suppress the crowd. Kang Qin tilted her head and looked at Bai Xiaowen. What kind of hidden weapon are you using? Bai Xiaowen took out the winter wand. What kind of hidden weapon is this? Even though Kang Qin was experienced and knowledgeable, she couldn't tell the origin of the winter wand. Bai Xiaowen picked his ear. Have the candles been lit yet? I'm going to start. Kang Qin didn't get an answer to her question. She was slightly annoyed. She was the same as Ng Jianfan. She was proud and arrogant. After being ignored once, she didn't ask again. She thought, even if this kid started practicing hidden weapons in his mother's womb, it would only take him a dozen years of hard work. He can't compare to me. Plus, he doesn't even have any attainments in internal energy. No matter what tricks he uses, he won't be able to extinguish the candle. On the other side, after the candle in the Death Wind Lantern was lit, Bai Xiaowen raised the winter wand. Watch carefully. I'll only use it once. Bai Xiaowen waved his wand. After a channeling bar, a frost shard flew out. In the eyes of the people in the Sword Song realm, the frost shard was an invisible but substantial icy force. Someone immediately exclaimed, "Icy finger force?" Regardless of whether it was the frost finger or not, Bai Xiaowen's frost shards was already destined to be the victor. How strong was his meditation at this time? Under the buff of the strongest academic genius, he had reached level 8. His spells had a 40-degree trajectory correction. Under everyone's gaze, the frost shard went around the arrow target and made a 40-degree turn. It lightly hit the Death Wind lantern and extinguished the candle inside. Even the outer wall of the lantern was covered with a layer of frost. This is not icy finger force. That kid doesn't know any internal energy at all. How can he use such a profound martial art? That's right. Without a hidden weapon as a medium, he can shoot out 1,000 feet with just the release of his internal energy. Is this a joke? Even the fourth master doesn't have this kind of strength. This is not a hidden weapon. It's clearly an exotic technique. I think the fire stick in his hand is strange. Bai Xiaowen pretended not to hear the clamor of voices. He smiled and said, "Everyone, during the competition, what I said was, use the least number of shots, under the condition that you don't touch the target, and extinguish the candle. May I ask if I violated any of the rules?" His words made the heroes of the Blood God Palace speechless. Although they knew that Bai Xiaowen might have used a trick, no one could find any fault with it. Kang Qin's face turned red and white. She was obviously very angry. Bai Xiaowen added fuel to the fire. "Valley Master Kang, I'm sorry. This junior succeeded by luck. Thank you for letting me win." Kang Qin said angrily, "This time doesn't count. I want to have a hidden weapon duel with you. I'll let you have a taste of my rain of flowers. Meteor bead. Misty rain heartbroken silk." She was obviously very angry. She wanted to shoot Bai Xiaowen into a beehive on the spot. Ying Jianfan walked over and patted Kang Qin's shoulder. "Ah Qin, forget it. Although the opponent didn't use a hidden weapon, he did extinguish the candle. It won't be too late to find trouble with him after today." Bai Xiaowen was not afraid of Ying Jianfan and Kang Qin's hidden threats. At worst, he could just leave and leave the sword song playing. He clasped his hands to the crowd. "Everyone, young Palace Master Gu has won 3 rounds. There are still 3 questions left. Which expert would like to enlighten me?" Xing Jiu coughed. "Young man, don't get carried away. This old man wants to see what kind of attainments you have in your mechanical puppet technique." Chapter 750. Old Mr. Xing is also interested in the position of Palace Master? Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "How old are you this year?" Xing Jiu did not understand and said lightly, "I'm 79 this year." "Why do you ask? It's rare to be 70 years old, not to mention that you're almost 80 years old. Why fight with young people?" Bai Xiaowen said. He thought in his heart that although this old man was old, he was very greedy for power. People like Xing Jiu who were proficient in mechanisms and puppets generally had high IQ. Even though he was about to die, he still did not see through the world and became a detached bystander. Otherwise, with his identity as an elder of 3 dynasties, everyone would give him some face. Well, if Gu Yulian became the palace master, he would be an elder of 4 dynasties. Xing Jiu snorted and said, "I'm not interested in the position of palace master, but I can't let Gu Yulian win the palace master's position with tricks. What's more, she relied on you, an outsider. If this spreads, the Blood God Palace's reputation will be ruined." As soon as he said this, Xing Jiu immediately stood on the side of the Blood God Palace and won cheers. Amidst the cheers, the heroes of the Blood God Palace also launched various personal attacks on Bai Xiaowen. Old Mr. Xing is right. This kid is most likely afraid of old Mr. Xing's mechanisms and has no ability to deal with it. If you know what's good for you, get down the mountain quickly. Gu Yulian snorted and walked lightly to stand beside Bai Xiaowen. Young Master Bai Xiaowen has already joined the Blood God Palace. How is he an outsider? All of you, shut up. It was strange to say that she did not do anything special, but with these few steps, there was a sense of dignity that could not be violated. The heroes of the Blood God Palace all stopped breathing and felt a sense of inferiority in their hearts. They did not dare to be presumptuous. Wonderful dance of 6 desires, invisibly affecting the mind. What a good technique. Xing Jiyu was very knowledgeable and said while stroking his beard. His voice was quiet and powerful, like an anvil hitting the bottom of the heart, causing the people of the Blood God Palace to recover from their shock. Only now did Bai Xiaowen realize that Gu Yulian's seductive martial art was called the 6 Desires Wonderful Dance. This martial art was extremely powerful. After mastering it, every frown and smile could move one's mind. It could be seen as a passive charm ability. This was also the reason why the Eye of Evolution did not counterattack. Powerful leaders usually had strong willpower and would not be affected by the passive effect of the Dance of 6 Desires. But if Gu Yulian took the initiative to use it, it would be hard to say. Xing Jiyu then looked at Bai Xiaowen. "Young man, how do you plan to compete with me in the art of puppetry? Tell me about it." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "This humble one would like to ask old Mr. Xing about his ability to control puppets. The simplest way is for you and me to control our puppets and compete." Thunderclap Kuang Wei sneered, "Peak Master Xing's heavenly silkworm skill is unrivaled in the martial arts world, and is best at controlling puppets in battle. You brat, you're arrogant and ignorant. You're courting death." The heroes of the Blood God Palace all agreed. Xing Jiyu stroked his beard and laughed. He thought that Bai Xiaowen had some tricks up his sleeve, but he did not expect him to be so honest. In terms of martial arts, he could not be considered to have reached the peak, but in terms of puppetry, he was confident that he would not lose to anyone. "All right. This method of competition is fair. These are the 4 mechanical puppets that I have painstakingly made. Please enlighten me." Xing Jiyu waved his sleeves, and 4 round wooden balls rolled out from under the wooden platform beside him. As his fingers moved nimbly, the wooden balls changed shape and finally turned into 4 mechanical puppets: a tiger, a snake, a bird, and an ape. It should be noted that these 4 mechanical puppets only looked like wild beasts, but their specific shapes were much more ferocious than wild beasts. For example, the wooden ape had 4 arms and held 4 weapons, while the wooden snake had a head and sharp teeth on both its head and tail. Bai Xiaowen calmly raised his hand and summoned the butcher. "This is your puppet? It's clearly a zombie monster." Xing Jiyu raised his white eyebrows. "Old mister, you're wrong. This zombie monster is also called a zombie puppet. It is a type of puppet. Who said that puppets must be made of wood? Puppets made from corpses are not considered puppets?" Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. The butcher stood there stupidly, scratching his head with his carrot-sized fingers. Saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth, making him look extremely stupid. Xing Jiyu was speechless at Bai Xiaowen's words. But with his insight, he could see that the butcher's strength was limited, elite level. Compared to his puppets, it was far inferior. If the two fought, Bai Xiaowen had no chance of winning. "All right, let's assume that this is a puppet. Can we begin?" "Wait a moment." Bai Xiaowen smiled and raised his hand. Skeleton swordsmen, shadow assassins, undead demon arcane masters, other than the Wrath Claw, a large group of summoned creatures appeared. Xing Jiyu was speechless. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Old mister, with your insight, you should be able to see that these puppets of mine are all made from corpses. It shouldn't be against the rules, right?" Xing Jiyu's old face flushed slightly. He couldn't swallow his words in front of everyone, no matter how hard he tried. This was also the mainstream view of the Sword Song Plane. Famous experts cherished their reputation. Their words were like spilled water. They could not go back on their words, especially in front of everyone. This brat surnamed Bai pretended to be weak and only summoned a corpse puppet, which made me fall for his trick. But with his ability, how can he control so many zombies? Don't be fooled by him. Xing Jiyu thought to himself. Bai Xiaowen glanced around and looked in the direction of the people from the 10,000 Snake Valley. He was worried that the poisonous guanine of the 10,000 Snake Valley, Jimingjue, would expose him. Jimingjue had seen Bai Xiaowen's army of summoned creatures. But at a glance, Jimingjue did not move. He only crossed his arms and looked coldly at the field, as if he was an unrelated spectator. In an instant, many thoughts flashed through Bai Xiaowen's mind. On the other side, Xingjiu's voice interrupted Bai Xiaowen's thoughts. "Bai Brat, are you still not going to start?" Bai Xiaowen came back to his senses and laughed. "All right, please enlighten me." Xingjiu moved his 10 fingers and the 4 mechanical beasts seemed to come alive. The clockwork on the back of the wooden bird turned and flew to a low altitude, ready to pounce at any time. The wooden tiger charged forward. The wooden snake and wooden ape supported it from the left and right, like a battle formation with tacit understanding. Chapter 751. The shadow assassin next to it stabbed with its blade, but only managed to reduce the wooden tiger's durability by a little. The skeleton warrior and the 4-armed wood ape exchanged blows, but only managed to cause a few wood shavings to fall from the wood ape. In the sky, Delifa and the mechanical wooden bird were fighting. The wooden bird's movements were not as agile as Delifa's. The spiritual spear kept hitting the wooden bird, but the latter did not seem to care at all. Its long beak extended and retracted as fast as lightning, like a rapier. These 4 mechanical beasts' durability, equivalent to their HP, was also astonishingly long. Xingjiu was a rare puppet master in the sword song plane. According to the normal battle logic, he should go straight for the main body. But this time, they were fighting puppets, so they could only rely on the puppets to determine the outcome. After a few rounds, the 4-armed wood ape suddenly rushed into the group of skeleton sword shield beasts. It suddenly spun and turned into a steel whirlwind. The skeleton sword shield beasts' bone fragments splattered, and their HP quickly decreased. The wooden snake's bamboo-like body tightened around the shadow assassin. Then, it opened its 2 mouths at the same time and spat out a puff of dark green mist, which was the poisonous gas hidden inside the wooden snake's body. The wooden bird flapped its wooden wings, and grains of iron sand were like a storm, enveloping all of Bai Xiaowen's summoned creatures below. These mechanical beasts were not only good at melee combat, but also had various hidden mechanisms, which were impossible to guard against. Bai Xiaowen controlled the summoned creatures to fight and retreat, but the 4 mechanical beasts were in hot pursuit. For a moment, the heroes of the Blood God Palace burst into cheers. Bai Xiaowen squinted his eyes. He noticed that the distance between the mechanical beasts and Xingjiu was more than 10 feet, but Xingjiu was still controlling them with ease. Strange, Xingjiu should be using his internal strength to control the mechanical beasts. Could it be that his internal strength can reach more than 10 feet? That's a bit unrealistic. Bai Xiaowen had already learned that martial arts masters could release their internal strength to more than 10 feet. They could already be called masters. Beyond 10 feet, no one could do it unless they had the help of a medium. Bai Xiaowen condensed his mental strength into a line, highly focused, and sensed. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he discovered a clue. At the tip of Xingjiu's 10 fingers, there were actually extremely thin white lines that connected to the various parts of the mechanical puppet. The internal energy he cultivated was also very special. It could be divided into many thin threads and spread along these extremely thin white threads, driving the various movements of the mechanical puppets. Heavenly Silkworm Art, Bai Xiaowen recalled Kuang Wei's words and finally found a flaw in Xingjiu's plan. The skeleton warrior brandished its greatsword and activated Whirlwind Slash. This Whirlwind Slash was not targeted at the 4 mechanical puppet beasts or Xingjiu. It was aimed at the area between Xingjiu and the mechanical puppet beasts. Wong! It was as if the skeleton warriors had crashed into a soft yet tough net. They were unable to cut off these thin white threads. The skeleton warrior was pushed back a few steps by the recoil. Of course, this collision was not meaningless. It affected the transmission of Xingjiu's inner strength. The movements of the 4 mechanical puppet beasts were all stiff for a second before they recovered their previous agility. Xingjiu snorted, "Kid, you've got the wrong idea. My mechanical puppet threads are made of heavenly silkworm silk. They are already extremely flexible. After infusing them with heavenly silkworm technique, their strength is even stronger than steel. You want to cut off my mechanical puppet threads? Dream on. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Is that so?" He raised his right hand and a red flame surged out. Grassworm sect ancient martial art, dark brush, activate. The countless fine heavenly silkworm silk threads immediately burst into flames after encountering the flame. They were all charred black and became much more brittle. The skeleton warrior charged forward again and raised its greatsword to attack. Xing Jiu's expression changed. This time, the heavenly silkworm silk threads could not take it anymore and broke. The four mechanical puppet beasts lost their mobility and instantly froze. Xing Jiu shouted, "Kid, you cheated. You said it was a competition between mechanical puppets. Why did you do it yourself?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "I didn't attack your mechanical puppet beasts nor did I attack you directly. I just set a fire on the ground. Is that against the rules? But you cut off my mechanical puppet threads and interfered with my mechanical puppet beasts." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "If it was so easily interfered with, it means that old Mister's mechanical puppet beasts are not perfect." He crossed his arms and under the control of his spiritual energy, the mechanical puppets formed a formation. Every one of them made a different movement. Xing Jiu sighed and thought to himself, "He saw through my mechanical puppet beast's technique but I couldn't see through his technique. I've already lost." Actually, if it was a real battle, Xing Jiu would not let the mechanical puppet beasts be more than 10 feet away from him. In addition, if it was a life-and-death battle, Xing Jiu would also participate. He was not a normal summoner and his fighting strength was not weak. But in this competition, there was no doubt that Xing Jiu had lost. The crowd was silent. In the previous few rounds, it could be said that Bai Xiaowen's side was cheating. But in this mechanical puppet beasts competition, Bai Xiaowen's mechanical puppet beast's technique was indeed better than Xing Jiu's. He was truly talented. Now, 4 out of the 6 rounds had passed. Other than Blood God Peak's chief Qin Hui who had announced his withdrawal from the competition, the only masters of the 3 peaks and 4 valleys who had not lost were Ji Mingjue, Poisonous Han Guanin, and Kuang Wei. "Valley Master Ji, please make your move. Your poison technique is the best in the martial arts world. If we compete in Poison Dao, that kid will definitely lose." Kuang Wei waved his hand and said. Ji Mingjue shook his head and said, "No, I've fought him before. This kid's zombie beasts are very strange. They are not afraid of my poison at all and can release a kind of decaying corpse poison. I haven't found a cure for it yet." Kuang Wei was stunned. Poisonous Han Guanin actually had a poison that could not be cured. How strange. But since Poisonous Han Guanin said this, it meant that she admitted that she was no match for him. There was no need to compete in Poison Dao. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone's eyes were focused on Kuang Wei. If they were to compete in consummate skills, Kuang Wei was good at using explosives. This question would be limited to destructive power. However, Kuang Wei had seen Bai Xiaowen's ability to make fire from a distance. He was a little hesitant. If Bai Xiaowen won again, Gu Yulian would ascend to the position of Palace Master and the 3 peaks and 4 valleys of the Blood God Palace would lose face. "Kid, we are all people of the martial arts world. We have competed in lightness skills, mechanisms, hidden weapons, swordsmanship, and mechanical puppets. But we haven't competed in real combat. Isn't that a joke? I won't compete in explosives with you in this round. Let's compete in martial arts. We will fight one-on-one and decide the winner." Chapter 752. The words of Thunderclap Kuang Wei, the master of Thunderclap Valley, also received the unanimous support of the heroes of Blood God Palace. That's right. In the martial arts world, if we don't compete in martial arts, do we compete in embroidery? There must be a real martial arts fight among the 6 literary fights. The reason for the discussion was that the people of Blood God Palace were clear about the situation. When poisonous Guanyin admitted defeat, Kwang Wei, the master of Thunderclap Valley, became the last barrier. If he was defeated by a trick, Gu Yulian would become the palace master. In fact, the people of Blood God Palace were not prejudiced against Gu Yulian, but they were not convinced. In the evil martial arts world where strength was respected, the fist was the absolute truth. Every generation of Blood God Palace master had to suppress the heroes to win the support of the people. On the Sword Discourse Cliff, the words martial arts, the unique way were not a decoration, but the spiritual core of Blood God Palace. Bai Xiaowen frowned slightly. He originally had some strategies to deal with Kwang Wei, which could win the last fight without bloodshed. But if he did not agree to Kwang Wei's request, all his previous efforts would be in vain. Just as Bai Xiaowen was about to speak, Gu Yulian suddenly stood up. "I'll accept this duel." There was a moment of silence. Kwang Wei sneered and said, "Girl Gu, you dare to stand up now? At least you have some courage. If you rely on that brat surnamed Bai to trick us, even if you win the palace master position, we won't recognize you." Gu Yulian said calmly, "Master Kwang, please enlighten me." Kwang Wei laughed and said, "Good. You are indeed the only disciple of Palace Master Wei. You are young but bold. I'm your senior, so I'll let you have 3 moves." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and felt a bit incredulous. Didn't Kwang Wei know Gu Yulian's strength? In the heart-cleansing pond, Gu Yulian easily killed the elite disciples of Mount Tai sect and scared the 2 leaders of Mount Tai sect away. According to Bai Xiaowen's speculation, Gu Yulian's strength should not be worse than Ing Jianfan's. Her growth potential was even greater. After all, she had the advantage of age. But where did Kwang Wei get the confidence to defeat Gu Yulian? Unless Gu Yulian had been keeping a low profile and had not revealed her strength in front of the division leaders. If that was the case, Gu Yulian's scheming was truly astonishing. In the face of Kwang Wei's provocation, Gu Yulian lightly shook her head. "No need. Since Valley Master Kwang is an elder, I should respect the elderly and take 3 moves from you. Within 3 moves, I will only defend and not attack. If I retreat even half a step, it will be my loss." There was a low cry of surprise in the field. Valley Master Kong Qin snorted. Valley Master Kwang is known as the Thunderclap Hand. His floating thunder technique is the most domineering. Even experts of the same level don't dare to face it head-on. "Gu girl, it's unreasonable for you to be so arrogant." Kwang Wei was not angry. Instead, he laughed and said in a mocking tone, "Good. This was the spirit that a palace lord should have. Take my first move." Kwang Wei's right palm flashed incessantly with a boom, striking towards Gu Yulian's shoulder. Gu Yulian's body did not move. Her left hand met the attack. The moment the 2 palms collided, Gu Yulian's palm became as white as jade, without a single flaw. There was a loud hum. Kwang Wei's palm was like a clay ox entering the sea. It did not cause any damage to Gu Yulian. That blinding electric force seemed to have lost its ability to conduct electricity. It did not display the paralyzing effect at all. Second move. Kwang Wei's expression changed. He raised his palms and took a deep breath. With 100% of his true qi, a serpentine electric force condensed between his palms and slapped towards Gu Yulian's face. Feathered snake palm. Kong Qin cried out in surprise. Based on insight, Bai Xiaowen received a notification from the spirit world's laws. Feathered snake palm was a domineering single-target attack technique. The so-called feathered snake was a winged flying snake that soared above the 9 heavens. It could summon the wind, summon the rain, and drive lightning. This technique was named after the feathered snake, and its lethality was above that of the 3-inch electric snake. When the 3-inch electric snake hit the enemy, it would add 15 points of true qi to the lightning damage. Every point of true qi would ignore 1 point of the target's magic resistance. After a hit, the enemy would have to undergo a constitution check. If they did not pass, they would fall into a heavily injured state where all their attributes would be reduced proportionally. Although Kwang Wei's floating thunder art was weak and the regeneration speed of his true chi was slow, the instantaneous explosive power was very strong. The maximum damage in a single attack was as high as 37 points. When he used Feathered Snake Palm at full strength, it could cause 555 points of theoretical lightning damage, treated as magic damage and had the exorcism effect. What was even more frightening was that this high damage would ignore 37 points of the target's magic resistance. If the target was not a leader of the same level with Constitution, taking a hit from Feathered Snake Palm would kill them instantly. Even if it did not hit the target's vitals, the target would be half crippled. This Feathered Snake Palm was Kwang Wei's ace in the hole. In an instant, Gu Yulian's entire body turned white. She turned into a white jade statue. Jade skin, passive. Physical and magic damage taken by Gu Yulian is reduced by 20%. Actively activating Jade Skin will absorb 10 true chi points of damage for 3 seconds and reflect the same amount of damage back. This skill requires the prerequisite skill, Jade Forging Formula, to take effect. With a boom, Gu Yulian's jade white hands came into contact with the 3-inch lightning snake. Her body did not shake. A layer of jade-colored light circled around her palms. She slapped it back and clashed with Kwang Wei's palm again. Kwang Wei felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He stumbled back 3 steps, his face pale. There was a murmur in the field. No one could understand why Kwang Wei, the one who initiated the attack, looked like he was at a disadvantage. With his insight, Bai Xiaowen could understand the reason behind the scene. Gu Yulian had absorbed most of the power of the Feathered Snake Palm and reflected it back. Kwang Wei, on the other hand, had used all his true chi to attack. He did not have any internal strength to defend himself. Naturally, he was at a disadvantage. The other division leader-level experts also saw the clues. Kang Qin snorted and said, "No wonder Bai Xiaowen and Gu Yulian are together. They are all jackals of the same tribe." She said she would let Valley Master Kwang make 3 moves. So this is what she was thinking. Ying Jianfan said, "She can take the Feathered Snake Palm head-on and not be injured. That is a skill." Kang Qin shouted, "Good. You are speaking for her?" Ying Jianfan said lightly, "What I said is the truth." Kang Qin was furious. If it weren't for the fact that everyone was watching, she would have immediately turned and left, not bothering with Jianfan anymore. At this time, the battle in the field had stopped. Kwang Weibai took the rebound of the palm and suffered internal injuries. All his attributes were reduced by 30%. Even the output of the floating thunder art was affected. His face changed, but he did not make a third move. Chapter 753. Thunderclap. Kwang Wei's surrender caused the entire Sword Discourse Cliff to fall silent. Everyone from the Blood God Palace stopped talking. Other than the 2 division leaders, Qin Hui and Ji Mingjue, who did not fight, there were a total of 5 battles. At first, everyone was full of confidence, thinking that they could at least win 1 battle and force Gu Yulian to give up the throne and hand over the secret key to the arsenal. But towards the end of the battle, after Bai Xiaowen won 1 division leader after another, everyone's confidence was in tatters. Gu Yulian only defended and did not attack. She defeated Kwang Wei in 2 moves, which was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Some people from the Blood God Palace who had lower cultivation and could not see through Gu Yulian thought to themselves, "So young Palace Lord Gu is so powerful. With such a gap in strength and a righteous title, it seems natural for her to be the Palace Lord." Only the 7 division leaders and their elders who had good eyesight knew that the gap between Gu Yulian and Kwang Wei was not as big as it seemed. Gu Yulian's true strength was beyond everyone's expectations, but she was only at the division leader level. She was not at the top level. Bai Xiaowen said, "Since the 7 division leaders have lost, it is natural for young Palace Lord Gu to be the next Palace Lord." Who else is not convinced? The Sword Discourse Cliff was still silent. None of the 7 division leaders wanted to express their opinions. Were they convinced? To be honest, they were not convinced. especially since Bai Xiaowen had used a series of tricks to win. How could anyone be convinced of his victory? But the martial artists of the Sword Song dimension were particular about keeping their promises. The truth was in front of them, and the result of the battle was out. To deny it and eat your words was worse than losing your life. I am not convinced. Suddenly, a slightly gloomy voice sounded. Everyone was surprised and looked towards the voice. With a single glance, everyone was shocked. The person who had said not convinced was actually the only person among the 7 division leaders who had always respected Gu Yulian, the only one who called Gu Yulian young master. It was Qin Hui, the manager of the Blood God Mountain. Gu Yulian did not show any surprise on her face. She glanced at Qin Hui and sighed, Chief Steward Qin, now that things have been settled, why don't you keep a low profile and bide your time? Why do you have to go against the trend? Qin Hui snorted, ever since I lured you to the Sword Discourse Cliff, I was already prepared to throw caution to the wind. After I came to the Sword Discourse Cliff and the 7 tribes tried to force me to abdicate, I knew that there was something wrong with you, Gu Yulian said calmly. However, why did you give up the chance to challenge me just now? Qin Hui said coldly, I underestimated the helpers you found. I thought that the other 6 leaders would be able to force you to back off, so I decided to lay low for the time being. I planned to fight for the position of Palace Lord after you were defeated. Bai Xiaowen understood that Qin Hui was trying to protect his image. The so-called persona was a consistent image in everyone's heart. As the manager of the Blood God Mountain, Qin Hui had always been Concubine Yin's trusted aide. He also obeyed Concubine Yin's appointed young master, Gu Yulian, and formed a persona of loyalty to Concubine Yin. When Gu Yulian asked Qin Hui if he wanted to challenge her, if Qin Hui agreed to the challenge, his image in everyone's hearts would collapse. Everyone would think that he was a traitor, and it would be very disadvantageous for him to fight for the position of Palace Lord. However, no matter how much he thought about it, he did not expect Gu Yulian to be able to defeat the leaders of the 6 tribes. Qin Hui's current mood was probably very regretful. Gu Yulian smiled slightly and said, Chief Steward Qin, since you decided to lay low, why don't you hide until the end? You can't go up or down like this. You're really making people look down on you. Qin Hui snorted coldly, even if I hide until the end, after you become the Palace Lord, will you still let me go? Gu Yulian shook her head and said, even if you don't make any contributions to the Blood God Palace, you've still worked hard. If you've always been cautious and conscientious, why would I find trouble with you? Qin Hui said loudly, Gu Yulian, don't pretend to be magnanimous here. When you were 7 years old, I saw through you. At that time, the Palace Lord adopted a total of 2 orphans. Besides you, there was also a girl called Su. She was 1 year younger than you and was favored by the Palace Lord. However, 3 months after Su entered the Blood God Mountain, she fell to her death at the bottom of the Sword Discourse Cliff. The leaders of the 7 tribes all remember this. The other leaders of the 6 tribes nodded and recalled this distant past. Gu Yulian frowned and said, what you said is unreasonable. Su accidentally fell off the cliff. What does it have to do with me? Qin Hui sneered and said, I'm the manager of the Blood God Mountain. Of course I know more things. Palace Lord Wei knows that the mountain roads of the Blood God Mountain are rugged. In order to ensure the safety of you 2 children, he sent 2 maids who are not weak to follow you. However, when Su died, the maids by her side were sent away. Where did they go? Only half a day after the incident, the maids who served Su committed suicide by taking poison. Is this also a coincidence? Gu Yulian snorted and said, they didn't protect you well and committed suicide to avoid punishment. Master has already made a conclusion about this matter, yet you're still here talking endlessly. Do you think you're smarter than Master? Qin Hui sneered again and said, Palace Lord Wei is extremely smart. I'm not as smart as her. Do you really think she doesn't know the tricks involved in this matter? She just doesn't want to delve into it. Since Su's death, she hasn't adopted any more orphans. Isn't it because she's afraid that you'll have evil intentions again? Qin Hui paused and then continued, Gu Yulian, I've watched you grow up. How can I not know what kind of person you are? You don't even blink your eyes when you cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. If I continue to swallow my anger, sooner or later I'll end up like that little girl called Ah Su and die without knowing why. Speaking up to here, Qin Hui raised his arm and shouted, "Division heads, I'd rather die than accept Gu Yulian as my master. Everyone, let's set things right and take down this demoness. Then we'll elect a new palace lord that everyone trusts." However, when these words were spoken, no one agreed. Kuang Wei sighed and said, "Chief Steward Qin, you're in the wrong here. According to the bet, the Gu girl should be the palace lord if she wins the bet. No matter how unwilling we are in our hearts, we can't go back on our words." Ing Jianfan said indifferently, "If you agree to the bet, you must accept your loss." Kang Qin was still a bit angry, but she didn't refute and held the same attitude. The other division heads also expressed their stance and didn't support Qin Hui. In fact, these 6 division heads abided by the bet on one hand. On the other hand, they were afraid of the existence of Wei Siqin, the dark concubine. After all, Gu Yulian was Wei Siqin's designated successor. They could only make things difficult for her according to the rules of the Blood God Palace. Now that Gu Yulian had passed the test of the 7 division heads, it would be breaking the rules if they went back on their words. If Dark Concubine were to appear at that time, it would be difficult for them to explain. Qin Hui snorted, "You'll all regret it sooner or later." He took a breath and suddenly let out a long howl. This howl could split rocks and penetrate the clouds, showing Qin Hui's profound internal strength. Everyone was a bit shocked when they heard it and thought to themselves, in terms of strength, this chief steward of the Blood God Peak is probably the strongest among the 7 division heads. Along with this howl, the sound of footsteps could be heard. It was neat and uniform like a military formation. Bai Xiaowen was quite experienced in this. After sensing with his spiritual power, he said, "Not good, there's a large group of people coming towards the Sword Discourse Cliff." As soon as he finished speaking, groups of people in black rushed out from the cliff and the valley entrance. They all held swords and sabers in one hand and crossbows in the other. There were hundreds of them, several times more than the elites of the 6 divisions on the Blood God Peak. Kuang Wei said in shock and anger, "Qin Hui, what are you doing?" Qin Hui said coldly, "Today, if Gu Yulian doesn't die, then I, Qin Hui, will die. Everyone, don't worry. As long as you don't act rashly, you'll be safe. Otherwise, these 300 crossbowmen won't just be decorations." Xing Jiu shouted, "Everyone, be careful. The crossbows they're holding are the broken qi crossbows specially made by the Tianji Peak." Everyone was stunned. The warriors of the Sword Song realm usually didn't use long-range weapons, but that didn't mean they didn't know how to use them. The broken qi crossbows these 300 crossbowmen were holding were all made for martial arts masters. And they themselves were all elite martial arts masters. When shooting, the crossbowmen would pour their internal strength into the arrows. The arrows would have an additional penetrative effect, specifically designed to break through the protective qi energy. Even if a leader was shot by the broken qi crossbows, it would be difficult for him to survive. After all, a person's internal strength was limited. The atmosphere was very tense. "Gu Yulian, hand over the secret key to the armory." Qin Hui shouted. Gu Yulian sighed, "Chief Steward Qin, are you really going to do this? Even if you get the secret key, what's the use? You're destined to never be the palace lord." Qin Hui sneered and didn't say anything. Gu Yulian glanced sideways at the black-clothed people and said loudly, "You've all been bewitched by Qin Hui. Now, as the palace lord, I order you to step back. If you can repent, I'll let bygones be bygones." The black-clothed people didn't react at all. Qin Hui sneered, "Gu Yulian, I've been in charge of the affairs of the Blood God Peak for many years. How can I be mediocre? These 300 blackguards are loyal to me. Even Palace Lord Wei can't command them. So you've had a rebellious heart for a long time. You don't even respect your master." Gu Yulian's face darkened. In for a penny, in for a pound, Qin Hui might as well go all the way and speak openly, I am extremely impressed by Palace Master Wei's martial arts. However, she's a woman after all. It's inevitable that she'll be soft-hearted and indulge in love. She doesn't pay much attention to the affairs of the Blood God Palace. Otherwise, with her unparalleled martial arts and great efforts, the Blood God Palace would have already unified the martial arts world of the Central Plains. How could it be in danger of being besieged by the seven sects? Anger flashed across Gu Yulian's beautiful face. She said in a deep voice, "Qin Hui, I wanted to let you go. However, you've disrespected my master. You can only die to atone for your crime." Qin Hui laughed. "Gu Yulian, are you dreaming? Now I'm the knife and you're the meat on my chopping board. You're at my mercy." As soon as Qin Hui finished speaking, he suddenly felt dizzy and the scenery in front of him blurred. He was shocked and quickly used his internal strength to check himself. He shouted, "Gu Yulian, did you use poison?" It wasn't just Qin Hui. On the Sword Discourse Cliff, the rest of the division leaders, and elite experts all swayed. Only Gu Yulian, Bai Xiaowen, and the people of the Thousand Snake Valley led by Qi Mingjue didn't have any abnormalities. It's the reverse Qi powder. Qi Mingjue, look at what you've done. Qin Hui didn't dare to use too much of his internal strength. He looked at Qi Mingjue and said angrily. The people of the Thousand Snake Valley tacitly surrounded Qin Hui and the dozen or so elites of the Blood God Peak. Poisonous Guanyin, Qi Mingjue, walked to Gu Yulian's side with a smile. He tilted his head and said to Qin Hui, "Since Palace Lord Wei has appointed Yulian as the new Palace Lord, you should have just obediently followed his orders. Why did you have to put on such a good show?" Bai Xiaowen suddenly realized that Gu Yulian already knew that the seven great sects were going to force her to abdicate at the Sword Discourse Cliff. Qi Mingjue had already stood on Gu Yulian's side. This also explained why Qi Mingjue didn't warn Xing Jiyu when he was betting on puppets with the Heaven's secret peak lord, Xing Jiyu. In fact, Gu Yulian didn't think that Bai Xiaowen could help her suppress the crowd. Her original plan was to let Qi Mingjue use the Qi reversal powder to trap the seven great sect leaders. Then, she would use threats and promises to make the seven great sect leaders accept her as their leader. Of course, this wasn't perfect. There might be a few stubborn people who would rather break than bend. There might even be a bloody conflict. It was far better than Bai Xiaowen winning the position of Palace Lord through a bet. At this time, the Black Guard on the cliff and at the valley's entrance hadn't been affected by the poison. However, in a situation where Qin Hui and the others were powerless to resist, they didn't dare to shoot at the rat for fear of breaking the vases. Gu Yulian said, "Qin Hui, why aren't you making the Black Guard put down their weapons? If you surrender now, I can pardon your death sentence." Poisonous Guanyin, Qi Mingjue, smiled and said, "Don't worry, Yulian. The Qi reversal powder spreads with the wind. Even if those Black Guard are a bit further away, they'll just fall a bit later." At this time, the Black Guard at the valley's entrance had already been affected by the Qi reversal powder. One by one, they fell to the ground with pale faces. The Qi reversal powder's poison was specialized in countering internal energy. The more one circulated their internal energy, the faster it would take effect. Moreover, those who cultivated internal energy had their internal energy circulating at all times. Even if they didn't actively circulate their internal energy, the poison would still take effect. It was just that the time it took to take effect was slower. Qin Hui saw that the situation wasn't good. He shouted, "Black Guard, fire!" The Black Guard really obeyed orders. They pulled the trigger on their crossbows and shot out arrow after arrow. Although they couldn't inject their internal energy and didn't have the effect of breaking their qi, at this time, almost everyone on the Sword Discourse Cliff had been poisoned by the qi reversal powder. They couldn't circulate their internal energy to protect their bodies, so it didn't matter if their qi was broken or not. For a moment, there were miserable screams. Only those division leaders and leader-level experts with profound internal energy could still wield their weapons and forcefully deflect the arrows. Qin Hui took advantage of this chaos and charged forward with all his might. 2 servants from the 10,000 Snake Valley tried to use their internal energy to block him. Qin Hui extended his palms, bypassed the 2 servants' arms, and soundlessly pressed them against their chests. The 2 servants immediately sputtered out blood from their 7 orifices and softly fell to the ground. Blood God Sutra. Seeing this scene, Gu Yulian couldn't help but cry out. When did Qin Hui master the Blood God Sutra? It was really hard to believe. In comparison, the fact that Qin Hui was able to break through the Qi reversal powder's obstruction and circulate his internal energy was insignificant. Chapter 754. Qin Hui led the way, and the group of loyal elites of the Blood God Palace behind him also tried their best to follow. Rushing to the entrance of the valley, Qin Hui ordered the Black Guard to retreat. If this dragged on, the Black Guard would be poisoned too deeply, and the Black Guard that he had painstakingly cultivated would all become Gu Yulian's prisoners. Gu Yulian was shocked by Qin Hui's Blood God Sutra, and missed the first opportunity to stop him. But now, she had more important things to do, and had no intention of chasing after Qin Hui. The important thing was to solidify the position of Palace Lord first, so as to avoid another mess when the time came. Sister Ji, tell the people of the 1,000 Snake Valley to stop chasing. Treating the wounded is more important. Gu Yulian said clearly. Ji Mingjue nodded. She was skilled in both poison and medicine, and thus the 2 words Guanyin in her name came from this. As for the people of the 1,000 Snake Valley, they were skilled in medicine as well as identifying poisons. Immediately, the people of the 1,000 Snake Valley scattered and took out medicine to treat the wounded people of the Blood God Palace on the Sword Discourse Cliff. Gu Yulian said, give them the antidote for the Qi reversing powder as well. Ji Mingjue said, what if they don't recognize you after giving them the antidote? Gu Yulian smiled and said, the leaders of the 6 divisions are all people who keep their promises. There's no need to use the Qi reversing powder as a threat. She had originally planned to do this, but now, of course, she wanted to win people's hearts. The 2 of them sang the same tune, and their beautiful words made the leaders of the 6 divisions feel a little better. Ji Mingjue ordered the distribution of the antidote. After taking it, the leaders of the 6 divisions of the Blood God Palace regained their ability to move. In fact, even if they didn't take the antidote, as long as they didn't circulate their energy, the poison would be expelled from the body with breathing after a period of time, and they would recover without medicine. After the 6 divisions stood up, they looked at Gu Yulian with complicated expressions. Ji Mingjue smiled and said, everyone, why don't you pay your respects to the new Palace Lord? The leaders of the 6 divisions looked at each other, and finally cupped their hands one after another. Greetings to the Palace Lord. Ji Mingjue frowned and said, the new Palace Lord has ascended to the throne, and you should perform the etiquette of 3 kneels and 9 kowtows. Your etiquette is too perfunctory. Ying Jianfan said faintly, if you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. I recognize her as the Palace Lord. However, she didn't really suppress everyone with her skills. She only used trickery to make us feel unconvinced. At this time, Kan Qin was of one mind with Ying Jianfan and said loudly, that's right, Gu girl. Although Palace Lord Gu has obtained the position, her methods are not righteous. Bai Xiaowen frowned. Originally, when the 6 division leaders met Gu Yulian, the B-rank hero side mission Master of the Divine Palace should have been completed, but he did not receive any notification. Bai Xiaowen originally thought that there was a delay in the information of the Spirit Realm's laws, but now, he frowned and realized that things were not that simple. In the team channel, Qiao Rui and Li Shi asked for the reason. Bai Xiaowen pondered for a moment before replying, perhaps it's because we won the battle through trickery. The leaders of the major clans are not convinced, so the mission isn't considered complete. Unless more than half of the remaining 6 division leaders wholeheartedly support Gu Yulian as the Palace Lord, our mission can only be considered complete. Li Shi thought for a moment. Right now, only Ji Mingjue is wholeheartedly supporting her. That's right. We still need to work hard to complete this B-rank hero side mission, Bai Xiaowen said. In fact, he had thought about it a long time ago. A hero side mission, even if it was just a B-rank hero side mission, wouldn't be so simple that the White Phoenix team could complete it without bloodshed. Gu Yulian's expression was calm as she said, "I know what you're all thinking. You all think that I'm young and inexperienced. Apart from my identity as Concubine Yin's disciple, I have no qualifications to inherit the position of Palace Lord. But ask yourselves, with my martial arts and wisdom, do I really not deserve to be the Palace Master?" The division leaders were silent. Gu Yulian was a generation younger than them, at least a dozen years younger. Now that her martial arts had reached the level of a division leader, her future was limitless. And in terms of intelligence, seeing through Qin Hui's scheme and ambushing Ji Mingjue in advance, with Bai Xiaowen, this young strategist by her side, was even more impeccable. Xing Jiu coughed and said, "Palace Lord Gu, Divine Palace is now in a precarious situation. Qin Hui's betrayal has greatly damaged Divine Palace's vitality. How will we face the invasion of the seven righteous sects? To say something disheartening, if Palace Lord Wei doesn't appear to preside over the situation, this old man is afraid that Blood God Palace's 100 years of foundation will be destroyed in a day." Gu Yulian said in a low voice, "We can't rely on luck in this battle. Master also has her own great enemies. There's no guarantee that she can return from this trip, so she passed the position of Palace Lord to me in advance. But I guarantee that as long as we are united, we will definitely defeat the seven righteous sects hypocrites. They won't be able to return." Lingyun Peak Master, Yin Mountain's Feihong Ji Mingjue laughed dryly. "Palace Lord Gu, anyone can talk big. If I can't do it, I will abdicate," Gu Yulian interrupted him. "But during this time, you must treat me as the real Palace Lord. Every order I give must be carried out without any discount. Can the division lords do this?" Everyone was silent. Ji Mingjue was the first to stand up and say, "This is a matter of course. Just as Elder Xing said, Divine Palace is already in a precarious situation. If we are still disloyal at this time, then there's no need to fight. We will be directly at the mercy of the righteous hypocrites. If we want to continue the foundation of Divine Palace, we must take Palace Lord as the backbone and unite as one." Ing Jianfan said, "Good. Before the seven righteous sects retreat, Sword Cleansing Valley will follow Palace Lord Gu's orders." Kang Qin also said, "Flower Cleansing Valley will also follow your orders. But remember what you said. If you can't lead Divine Palace to victory against the seven righteous sects, you must abdicate." The division lords of Tianji Peak, Thunder Valley, and Lingyun Peak also expressed their positions. Their meaning was roughly the same as what Kang Qin said. Hearing this, Bai Xiaowen understood. It turned out that this B-class hero side mission was closely related to the battle between the righteous and the evil. The White Phoenix squad must assist Gu Yulian in repelling the seven righteous sections. Only then could they get the sincere support of the division lords and complete the mission. Xiao Rui said in the team channel, "Gu Yulian is really cunning. Abdicating if she can't do it. If she can't do it, won't Blood God Palace be destroyed? Who should she abdicate to?" Bai Xiaowen shook his head and replied in the team channel, "Not necessarily. The ancient people of Huaxia are very particular about status and orthodoxy. In the imperial court in exile, the ministers still call him Your Majesty. Blood God Palace is the biggest sect of the evil path in the martial arts world. Even if it is destroyed by the righteous path, it is still a centipede. A large number of people will escape to recuperate and find a place to build a new Blood God Palace. What's more, the position of Palace Lord also means various martial arts in the arsenal, which is infinitely attractive to the powerhouses of Sword Song Plain." Before Bai Xiaowen could finish, he suddenly heard Gu Yulian calling him. Chapter 755. Bai Xiaowen smiled, "Palace Master, don't call me that. Just call me by my name. I've already joined the Blood God Palace. My previous identity is nothing." In front of the 6 division leaders, Bai Xiaowen had to give Gu Yulian enough face. Otherwise, as the palace master, calling him young master would damage her dignity. Gu Yulian was quite satisfied with Bai Xiaowen's understanding of the situation. She pondered and said, "In that case, I'll temporarily appoint you as a special envoy of the Blood God Palace. I'll give you the Blood God token, allowing you to act as you wish." The 6 division leaders looked at each other, and some of them were surprised. The Blood God token represented the will of the palace master. Its prestige was second only to the palace master herself. The resources it could mobilize were no less than those of the 3 peaks and 4 valleys. But thinking about it, Bai Xiaowen had done a great service for Gu Yulian and was already her confidant. It was normal for her to give him the Blood God token. Previously, Gu Yulian mobilized people to set up an ambush in Stone Tablet Valley, making the experts of the 5 major sects lose face because of the Blood God token. Of course, when the 7 division leaders tried to force her to abdicate at Sword Discourse Cliff, they were fighting for the position of Palace Master. Even the Blood God token was useless. Gu Yulian took out the Blood God token and handed it to Bai Xiaowen. The Blood God token was about the size of a palm. It was red all over and made of some unknown metal. It was abnormally hard and cold to the touch. The front of the Blood God token was engraved with a skull. The back was engraved with the word token and a circle of small words, "Those who don't obey will be killed." After Bai Xiaowen thanked her, he bowed and said, "Palace Master, what do you need me to do?" He got into the role very quickly. Gu Yulian said, "Qin Hui's betrayal is the greatest threat to the palace. This person knows all the mechanisms and secret paths of Yan Mountain's 3 peaks and 4 valleys, as well as the distribution of troops. If he leaks this information to the 7 righteous sects, it will be detrimental to the palace. I want you to hunt down Qin Hui and take back his head. How many people do you need?" Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and thought carefully. He said, "Palace Master and the division leaders still need to prepare for the final battle with the righteous sections. The 4 of us are more than enough to hunt down the rebel Qin Hui." "Are you sure?" Gu Yulian asked. A notification from the Spirit Realm precepts sounded, "You are rejecting the help of a Spirit Realm being. This will change the difficulty of the mission." Bai Xiaowen had expected this. He said calmly, "Yes." Kang Qin even said, "Special Envoy Bai, you are being too arrogant. Qin Hui's strength is unfathomable. He is almost the strongest person in the Blood God Palace except for Palace Master Wei. What's more, he has cultivated the Blood God Sutra. He is not easy to deal with." Bai Xiaowen cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your concern, Valley Master Khan. However, it's not appropriate for too many people to participate in the pursuit of the rebels to avoid alerting the enemy." Kang Qin snorted, "Who cares about you? I'm just worried that the mission will fail and Qin Hui will escape. It's none of my business if you're asking for trouble." Gu Yulian, on the other hand, trusted Bai Xiaowen. She nodded and said, "All right, the 4 of you. Remember, you must kill Qin Hui before he comes into contact with the leaders of the 7 righteous sects. If you can bring back Qin Hui's head, the position of Blood God Peak's new supervisor will be yours." A notification from the Spirit Realm precepts sounded, "Frowny Face Elite Side Mission, Pursuing the Rebels, activated. Mission objective, kill the former supervisor of Blood God Peak, Qin Hui, and bring back his head. Mission difficulty, S+. Mission time limit, 48 hours. Mission reward, unknown." Bai Xiaowen chose to accept the mission. Gu Yulian then said to Ji Mingjue and the other precepts, "Pass down the order. All the sentries of the Blood God Palace are to be on high alert. In addition to guarding against the attack of the 7 righteous sects, we must also know about the movements of the traitor Qin Hui and his group." The 6 precepts also received the order. The spectacular battle of the Sword Discourse Cliff thus ended. Under the leadership of the precepts, the elites of each precepts returned to their own territories to defend. Ji Mingjue, who had already lost his territory, stayed with Gu Yulian at Blood God Peak to help Gu Yulian take over the affairs of Blood God Peak. Gu Yulian saw that the 4 members of the White Phoenix precepts had just arrived and didn't have any foundation. She specially instructed them to look for Ji Mingjue if they lacked any resources. It seemed that Ji Mingjue was the quartermaster of the Blood God Palace camp. At this time, Bai Xiaowen's achievement points were still 0. Due to the urgency of time, the 4 members of the White Phoenix Precepts didn't rush to look at the exchange list from Ji Mingjue. Instead, they left the Sword Discourse Cliff and began to carry out the mission of pursuing the rebel, Qin Hui. Xiaowen, why did you refuse Gu Yulian's help? Qin Hui's forces are very strong. There were several leader-level experts who escaped with him. Moreover, most of the 300 Black Guard also escaped. Li Shi was a bit worried. With just the 4 of us, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult to kill Qin Hui under the protection of so many people. Qiao Rui also nodded in agreement. Qin Hui's strength is also very strong. He should be even stronger than Ing Jianfan. Even if he's alone, it won't be easy for us to surround and kill him. Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, Gu Yulian's help has a condition. It's related to the difficulty of the mission. The difficulty of this mission fluctuates. If we ask Ing Jianfan and the other division leaders to lead the team, the difficulty of the mission will plummet. However, the rewards will also be greatly reduced. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said, this mission is actually related to our position in the Blood God Palace. If we can kill Qin Hui without outside help, it means that we have the qualifications to be on equal footing with the 6 division leaders. Didn't you guys realize that it was only after I refused Gu Yulian's help that she promised me the position of the new manager? The 3 members all nodded. Bai Xiaowen said, high difficulty also means high rewards. Qin Hui and the several chief-level experts around him are all treasure chests. Those elite-level Black Guard are also mobile spiritual energy points. If someone from the spirit realm intervenes to help us, our battle evaluation will drop, and our rewards will also be greatly reduced. As for the lack of strength, Bai Xiaowen didn't think so. When roaming the spirit realm, one couldn't just look at the strength of the enemy on paper. The 4 of them arrived at the intersection between the Blood God Peak and the Tianji Peak. After showing the Blood God token, they found out that Qin Hui had taken the opportunity when the sentries were still unaware of his defection to lead the Black Guard away from the Blood God Peak. They followed him all the way down. The sentries between the Tianji Peak and the Sword Washing Valley reported that they hadn't seen Qin Hui. Bai Xiaowen then asked Qiao Rui to use the Falcon Spirit to conduct a large-scale search. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.